O Canada. Thank you, everyone. In 1820, indigenous people here began welcoming settlers from all over the empire. Soon, they were helping slaves escaping from the United States to settle here too. Today, our indigenous founding partners are still here enjoying this land with us. They fish and camp under their treaty rights. Indigenous people in their thousands also live with us as neighbors and friends. Our indigenous white and black settlers created a community with an attractive degree of harmony and prosperity. And in 1857, Ontario gave official recognition of Oakville as a town. At Town Hall, all of these years later, we fly the flag of the Mississaugas of the Credit beside the flags of Oakville, Ontario, and Canada. We fly these flags together to acknowledge our origins. People from all over the world are attracted to the livability that we have and are creating. We offer newcomers a warm spirit of welcome. We offer everyone our founding story so everyone knows what we are part of. We feel sorrow and distress for acts of racism and intolerance suffered across Canada and here at home. We want our future to be equitable and inclusive for everyone. The path of truth and reconciliation can unite us all. Please keep well, stay safe, and let us know on council of any chance to be helpful to you and yours. Please let us know anytime you can help increase Oakville's harmony, prosperity, and livability. Madam Clerk, I understand we may have some regrets for this meeting.
Yes, we have regrets from Councillor Dudek and Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, would two of you like to move and second our minutes, or would anyone like to offer any changes or corrections? Councillor Elgar, thank you for the motion. I saw a seconder over here, Councillor Shi, I think. Thank you. Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, the minutes are adopted. The next thing before us is if two of us would move us into committee of the whole. Councillor Adams and Councillor McNeice, thank you. Any objection? There being none, we are now resolved into committee of the whole. And our first item is the consent item. I'd look for a motion for the bylaw to authorize the issuance and sale of debentures. Councillor Shi, thank you. Any objection? That is carried. Thank you, Councillor Shi. There are no confidential items. And now I'm going to pull forward the 9.2 rather than go to the next item on the agenda as a courtesy to the registered delegations, one of whom has a time constraint. And we have, as I understand it, available from the staff, Julie Clark, Director of Strategy, Policy and Communications, and Suraj Mann, the Manager of Corporate Strategy, as well as Sarah and Andy from Deloitte, if you have questions for it, and for the strategic plan. There is no planned presentation that I know of. However, should one be wanted, some kind of reprise of where we are is available. But I believe everybody here is thoroughly immersed in it. We've certainly looked at it many, many times. So, Madam Clerk, I see no indication of questions for anyone, so I'm going to ask you to call the registered delegations.
The first registered delegation is Hart Jansen.
Mr. Jansen, welcome. Is he joining us remotely, perhaps? Here's a phone calling in here. Is that him? Well, Madam Clerk, in the absence of Mr. Jansen, perhaps you'd like to call the next delegation.
Okay, the next delegation is Kevin Graff from the Downtown Oakville BIA, the chair.
Welcome, Mr. Graff. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much.
Good to have the chair of the BIA here with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, thanks for the invite, and council members, thank you very much for your time this evening. For some context, my name is Kevin Graff. I've been a resident of Oakville for about the past 20 years. My office has been downtown Oakville for about that same period. I run a company called Graff Retail. We do consulting and training work with retail chains globally, so I have a pretty good sense of the retail marketplace. But for my purposes tonight, I'm here as the current chairperson of the Downtown Oakville BIA. You're all residents of Oakville, so you no doubt, like I have, been pretty amazed at the transformation that's been happening in downtown Oakville over the past 3 years. It's gone through this amazing, I would call it almost rebirth downtown, due in partly because of the transformation of the landscape that's downtown, but also in terms of how things are run downtown. It's much more community-minded than ever before, much more interactive. The beautification standard is off the charts down there. And we've had this phenomenal partnership with the town of Oakville along the way, which we're very appreciative of. We have a strategic plan. I know you're in the middle of your strategic planning process as well. Our plan is very clear on what we're trying to become. We're trying to become the best downtown in Canada, and as part of that, become the best part of people's days. And so we've put together what we think are 6 things we would like you to consider as part of your strategic planning process. The first of which on our list is something that I know is on your radar, but we would encourage you to move forward as fast as possible with the approval and execution of the new cultural hub in the best downtowns globally. Those types of cultural centers are essential to building community, for attracting people down there. I believe it's long overdue, and I encourage you to move as quickly as you can to make that a reality downtown. I think it'll be an amazing addition, not just to downtown, but to the entire town of Oakville, where what we have now is a little dated. My second point that's on here really comes about, in some respects, and to give it some context, a comment was made to me the other day. I was kind of pushing the envelope on trying to raise some of the beautification standards downtown, and somebody said to me, well, the status quo is actually pretty good right now. And as I tell all my clients, the status quo is just death waiting to happen. If you're not moving forward, you are moving backwards. So the second request that we would have is to actually execute something that was approved, renovate the town square as was planned and designed for in 2024. The downtown is great, but it sorely needs the heart of its downtown renovated to bring it to world-class status. We're going to reach the status of the best part of people's days. That's where we gather most of our people down there. We have this opportunity to take Oakville from where it is now to an even higher level. Third, nobody ever wants to talk about parking, but parking's on here. There's been talk of a parking garage for an awful long time. You may or may not know this number. We attracted in downtown Oakville last year 7 million visitors. And that number continues to grow. Case in point, this past March, we attracted more people in the month of March than in any other month before. And that's March. That's not even supposed to be a busy month down there. So we keep attracting all these people. We eventually have to figure out where we're going to put them down here. And parking becomes a major issue. You've got the one parking garage that's going to close for a period of time for renovations. I get that. But at some particular point, the experience that we're trying to create for our customers goes a little sideways if we can't put them somewhere Somebody has to find some place to be able to park their car in a much more convenient manner. Next on the list, and it's really tied to that, it's an extension of that, and it's above what I always refer to as my pay grade, because I don't know what the answer is for this. But we need to establish in this town and implement a much larger mobility strategy. Right, I was reading today how more and more cities are moving away from a car-first mentality, much more to a pedestrian-first mentality. But even stepping back from that, some of the simpler things that we've got to be able to consider along the way is how do we get people from the GO station to downtown, like fast. Right, not a circuit route, but fast, for a lot of different reasons, not just for the consumers that are coming down, but for the merchants who are bringing in employees from other areas. Those employees are not going to accept these jobs in downtown Oakville, and it's really hard still today to find staff if it's a 15-minute journey from downtown, from the GO station to downtown and then back again. We've got to figure out some way to get these people down fast, right, from there and back to it. And then you just go extension, right, north-south transportation. How do we, for mobility strategy, move people from the north to downtown, from the soon-to-be-realized midtown, right? How are we moving all these people as part of it? And then additionally, east-west. There's currently no east-west single route, which, boggles my mind, but we've got to figure out a way to move people expediently just east-west along Lakeshore, right? There's a big opportunity, I think, in there. We have a request that came up from our board as well, because these are board ideas. We'd really like the town's events team to consider, you guys run some amazing town-sponsored events, some big events, to consider making use of the downtown once a year for some soon-to-be-envisioned town-sponsored event. I think we represent the downtown and the values of the downtown and the community exceptionally well, and I think there's that opportunity that's in there as well. And our last, it's longer-term thinking, but I think it's maybe the most important longer-term thinking for the health of this downtown, because it's proven to be the case for every downtown that works in this and every other country and city around the way, is we need to figure out a way to improve the density downtown. We can only grow so fast and so far as a downtown with visitors. At some particular point, we need more residents, we need more commercial businesses in the downtown core. So we would encourage you to take a look at the plans and figure out how it is we move in that direction. We have this little gem called Downtown Oakville that I think everybody is really proud of. It's working really well right now. We just think it can go that much better. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Mr. Graff, thank you. Before you run away, you might have a question or two.
Okay, sorry.
There's several showing on my screen, Councillor Elgar and Councillor Longo. And to kick it off, I'll just say, I would be very glad to see the downtown cultural hub and town square and parking listed in our action plan in some way. I would think it would belong under infrastructure, but that's for council to decide. I'm going to turn now to your series of discussions that you have ahead of you. Councillor Elgar, Councillor Longo, and Councillor Chisholm, and there may be more. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Kevin, thanks for coming. I guess you talk about the downtown square, best in the world. In your opinion, what should be down there to make it the best in the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. It's a simple question with a great big answer, right? If you take a look at the best hubs in the world, I just got back from a tour of Central Europe and was in Vienna and Prague and a number of places, and you take a look at some of the amazing things that are there. We have a lot of that in place. Now what we have to be able to do is just continually build on it. So some of the ideas that I talked about, 2-3 years ago, time's flying by, you redid the downtown, the streets, the sidewalks, the lighting, fantastic. But now it becomes that question that says, okay, well, that's really great. Now we have to eventually finish the job, right, by doing the town square, because it's tired and old, right? So we have to finish that. So now we start to get to the infrastructure side. We're continuing to try to raise the bar on beautification so that when people come down there, now it's something that looks great every day. And then we can just continue to raise the bar so that we create an environment downtown so that, You can be sitting at home with your family, and you don't have to know if anything's going on downtown. You just know, let's head downtown because there's something always going on. So we're in the business at the BIA, in some respects, of trying to build community. And as I always say, community happens when people get together, but people only ever get together if there's something really worthwhile to do. If you give them a place to go that's worthwhile, or give them activities and events that are worthwhile, then we create community, because now people come together. And we're starting to see that, right? Like 7 million people came downtown last year, which is infinitely more than we've ever had down there before, since we've been able to track data. It's that type of ongoing process.
Where could I go and see what you envision now? You've done the travel, so where would you say the best place right now?
Well, you know, if I give it to you just like even from like a Canadian perspective, downtowns have struggled mightily in this country for the most part. Like you'd be hard pressed to find good downtowns in Canada. You can find cores of really great downtowns in Canada. You can go out to Vancouver and find a really good core, or Victoria and find, you know, a core in those areas. They're tough, they're few and far between, which is why I'm excited about the potential that exists to be able to do something in Oakville that most people have not been able to do. It's even if you link it to the mobility strategy. No community in Canada has been brave enough, have enough foresight to be able to go, you know what, no, we're gonna get the cars off the road and we're gonna like do pedestrian first and other mobility things first, right? Maybe we're gonna be that community that's gonna go, no, we're gonna be first, right? That's for you folks to decide, but at some point, maybe that's where we wanna go with this thing.
So 8 million people came to Oakville. How did they arrive? Do you have any stats on that as to, was it a car basically, or was it a GO train?
I'd suggest, I don't have the stats on it personally. Anecdotal evidence, just from being down there every day, the vast majority of people are arriving by car.
Yeah, that's what I would suspect too.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. And Mr. Graff, could you just clarify, this is 7 million visits, not necessarily 7 million distinct different people?
Yeah, 7 million visitors to downtown.
Okay,
right?
thank you.
The average visitor comes 8 times a year to downtown. And they factor out, because I had to ask the question too, they factor out employees and people who live right downtown.
Well, I hope my visits are counted. I go a lot more than 8 times. Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Mr. Graff, for great ideas. A couple questions. The first one is, if you were to prioritize 1 to 6, because they're great ideas, what would your recommendation to council be to prioritize the 1 to 6?
1 to 6. Number 1 on my list: renovate the town square. Complete the work that is unfinished down there. Number 2, parking garage. Number 3, cultural hub. Do you want me to keep going on that, or is that okay?
No, I think that's great. Kind of gives I would kind of pick those as well. My next question is, do you feel that the recent free transit for seniors and for youth under 19, has that helped people get to downtown more, do you think? Or have you not really seen any impact related to that?
In fairness, I really can't provide any insight into that. I haven't seen it, but then again, there are, you know, if we talk to our executive director or head of marketing in the BI office, they would have a much better response for you than I could as the volunteer chair of the board.
Okay, because you mentioned there about mobility and mobility strategy.
Right.
If, you know, being able to get people more accessible and, you know, cost effective to be able to take free transit, you know, if that could help to bring people more downtown, but, you know, that'd be great to try and correlate those two.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting, and you know, it's amazing how things happen from a timing perspective. You know, just today I'm reading about, you know, different cities in the U.S. that are experimenting with free transit as a means of opening up access to all kinds of different classes of individuals, and at the same time improving business routes. Right, eliminating these barriers, getting cars off the road, doing these things. You know, and when you travel, but for those of you who've, you know, done travel, you get around to some of these cities, international cities, the transit is just amazing. You know, you don't need a car. There's trams running constantly. There's subways all over the place. There's bike lanes. There's scooters. You don't need a car, right? You just get around, no problem at all. It's not where we are in North America, Canada specifically, but it is a possibility one day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Chisholm.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you, Kevin, for your speech and everything, all the wonderful things we want to do in the downtown. And I just wrote down a few things, the comments you made, status quo, we should be moving forward, build community. Is ever the intent to look at not just from Navy Street over to, I can't remember the street now at the end. Allen, thank you. To extend it out to on the other side of the bridge down Lakeshore and up Kerr Street is called that as a main downtown. It seems you're focused on just this one.
Yep.
And I'm looking at we're talking strategic now. Down the line, I think there's more possibilities. I understand the culture hub and all those things, but there's more possibilities with that, including that and encompassing that as a downtown for the betterment of Oakville. That's the kind of discussions I think we need to have between the BIAs to look at that further, because it is very, like you said, status quo, and that's what you've got. You've got the streets of Navy and Allen,
right,
but you don't go any further. Where you see what's happening in the development on Lakeshore, right out almost to Dorval now, and up Kerr Street, there is a lot of possibilities to look at that in a bigger realm rather than just focusing on those two areas.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you, right? From a efficiency, from a marketing point of view, I mean, we've had very informal discussions, not as part of the board, just sidebar discussions about, you know, we have 1, 2, 3 BIAs in here, all doing kind of the same thing.
I can understand the Barney BI because of just by location, but I mean, you know, I don't want to jump on Councilor O'Hara's position on this, but we are attached to the downtown. To me, the Kerr Street and the Lakeshore is downtown, and it's not just segmented on the other side. Just so hopefully that strategically you're looking towards that as something that might be feasible for the town to look at in its entirety. So I just leave it as that, Kevin.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a very worthwhile vision that's worth pursuing.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm, for your outing as a marriage broker. Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, through your worship. Thanks for the presentation. Very, very inspiring. And while I'm not on the Bronte BIA, I'm in the ward, attend the meetings there. So I'll kind of piggyback and just sort of encourage a balanced approach with the BIAs. You know, we've got a largely vacant public square in our area that needs some attention. We've got, dare I say, parking nightmares in our ward and lack.
Yes, I know. I've been
public
told.
lots, as you've heard, and in the village we have in Bronte Village proper, no civic institutions or cultural institutions at all. So you know, I would encourage conversations between the BIAs because I think there's some commonality. I do agree they have unique identities, but I'll certainly be encouraging more dialogue, and you know, I think that it's worth sharing ideas because we're in the same town, and we've got unique attributes to each downtown area. So
exactly.
Thanks for your delegation.
Well, and I'm moving to Bronte next year, so I'll be looking
right.
forward to Bronte
We'll
sort of
recruit
elevating
you.
its game.
Yes.
it's gonna be in my backyard, so I'll be like very motivated to help over there.
Okay, well, you've let the cat out of the bag now. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Let me just say, Kevin, thank you for your leadership, for chairing the board for as long as you have, bringing inspiration. Just to give some clarity to the council, ballpark, what do we spend annually in the downtown BIA on beautification?
Ballpark $600,000.
So we invest a great deal of the merchants' levy to make downtown special. And I think what you've raised today is reinforcing that, you know, you guys are really stepping up to making it a special place, and for all the work you do and all the work you're going to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. And Mr. Graff, thank you very much for the time you took to share these thoughts with us. And I think now you get to go and make your date.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thank all of you.
Oh, and good news, our other delegation is now on the line and ready to join us. What a piece of fortuitous timing. Welcome, Mr. Jansen. Council looks forward to your information.
Sorry, just here we go. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to delegate this evening. So I'm making this delegation on behalf of Hasten Halton Action for Climate Emergency Now. Next slide, please. And I just want to point out that this delegation is relevant to both the strategic plan and the Climate Emergency Declaration Progress Report. I don't know if it's still relevant as far as the agenda order, but it seemed to me that the Climate Progress Report could have been considered in advance of the strategic plan. In any case, next slide. So in order to properly respond to the climate crisis, we need programs that reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the community or facilitate their reduction through various public, civil society, and private sector initiatives. We currently have no substantial programs in Oakville that meaningfully reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the community. We are not on track to meet either the targets in Oakville's community energy strategy or the more ambitious and necessary national and international targets that we are all familiar with that would result in sustainability of our local and global environment. So why are the emissions in Oakville not coming down? The latest data we have for Halton region shows that emissions continue to rise. We declared a climate emergency 4 years ago. Our strategic plan addresses climate action, and we have a community energy strategy. So what's missing? The answer is that we've taken a business as usual approach to this very challenging problem with insufficient resources, lengthy planning phases, and inappropriate progress measurement. We've devoted more attention to corporate emissions reduction, which is 1.5% of the problem, than to community emissions reduction, which is 98.5% of the problem. Next slide, please. We have a community energy strategy, but the climate progress report you are receiving today doesn't clearly state that we are way behind in trying to meet even its inadequate goals. A lot of ink and emphasis in the climate progress report is devoted to risk management, that is the task force on climate-related financial disclosure. We much more urgently need a task force on how to meet the goals of the community energy strategy. This is an extremely tough problem. We shouldn't kid ourselves. We have seen considerable thoughtfulness devoted to the problem through the Oakville Energy Task Force, including, of course, the involvement of the town of Oakville, and some bold action with the formation of Future Energy Oakville. We have seen dedication by volunteers and by town staff. But this action has not been sufficient, and we have suffered serious setbacks. The proposed strategic plan does not even include the indicators we need to properly measure progress on this front. We need to redouble our efforts and exponentially increase the resources we devote to this task. Next slide. So the mayor first mentioned the Halton Municipal Climate Team on April 4th at a council meeting. At least to my knowledge, that was the first I had heard of it. So is this the reset we need for climate action in Oakville and Halton? I hope so, but it is not at all clear. This recent initiative seems unusual in that it has not been voted on at any council, to my knowledge. I stand to be corrected. It is not apparent that it is part of the regional strategic plan. I have seen no documentation describing this initiative in any detail. What is its formal status vis-a-vis municipal and regional strategic plans? So there are numerous questions around this potentially important initiative. Is council aware of the details? Is council satisfied with this initiative and its ability to help achieve emission reduction goals? What is the role of town staff in this initiative? I urge council to ensure that this initiative will provide the clarity and transparency that the issue deserves, as well as public consultation and involvement. Next slide, please. I mentioned before that we need thoughtfulness, bold action, transparency, and substantial resources. We can't achieve the important objective of community emissions reduction through business as usual. We have to understand that the most important objective by far is community emissions reduction. Focusing on corporate emissions is like looking for your lost keys under the streetlight. It's easier to see what you're doing, but you're not going to achieve your objective. I suggest we invest more money as wisely as possible. Other municipalities in Ontario, such as Guelph, Kingston, and lately Mississauga and Hamilton, and of course elsewhere in Canada, have done more and are further down the road. We need all hands on deck, and the town's strategic plan does not sufficiently recognize the problem or enable effective solutions. The regional strategic plan seems to be in the same boat, and I will be making some similar points at the regional council meeting tomorrow. I urge Oakville Council to abandon business as usual on this most important issue and adopt strategies and actions befitting the emergency that you declared 4 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jansen, for your information. Councillor O'Meara has a question for you, followed by Councillor Elgar. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Hart, for delegating today. Hart, do you have a breakdown of sources of emission in Oakville?
The short answer is no. I think the best information that we have is in the community energy strategy. When you look at different reports across the GTA and other jurisdictions, you're looking at about 30 to 40%. And this, again, it probably applies pretty much the same in Oakville. You're looking at 30 to 40% of emissions coming from residential sources. So primarily home heating in the winter. And you've got about 40 to 45% from transportation, and the rest from industry / infrastructure. So that's the rough breakdown. But again, it varies by data source and by specific jurisdiction.
Has your organization ever lined up what municipalities have actual legislative authority over compared to what emissions are being admitted and what we actually have control to legislate over?
No, we have not. So yes, it's important to recognize one's limitation. And of course, that means partnerships are supremely important. And it's important to set appropriate objectives. And some municipal jurisdictions are more ambitious than others. So it's a judgment situation in terms of how important is the issue and how much does a municipality want to step up to help solve the problem.
And by stepping up to help solve the problem, I don't want to take words out of your mouth, but that would be by stepping up to help throwing money at other levels of government's legislative authority to try and incentivize them to do things that we can't control, but we're asking them to do that other levels of government have the authority to make them do. Is that a misstatement, or would that be accurate?
I mean, I would say that's a misstatement. I think there are things that we can do together with the private sector, which would be effective investments and would contribute significantly to emissions reduction. I think there are things that Oakville could do, including enabling local improvement charges for energy efficiency retrofit that could have been done anytime in the last 11 years. You could look at phasing out gas-powered equipment for landscaping and maintenance. There's all kinds of things that can be done that have not been addressed. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. I mean, there could be an initiative to enlist heat pump coaches who are, either modestly paid or volunteers to facilitate transition to heat pumps from fossil fuel home heating. I mean, there's a long, long list of things that can be done that I would put to you have not been looked at because there are we didn't have an extra staff person in Oakville to look at them. That's my proposition.
No, and I get that, and I guess that's what I'm trying to find out. I'd like to find the list of, and you're right, there's some bylaw stuff we can do to help shrink the number of emissions from, like you said, landscape companies and things like that, and what that impact is. We have authority over that, but I would be very interested in other things like, supporting a heat pump coach or something. I mean, that's money that we're spending on that. I'd be very interested in seeing a categorization of, okay, what can we do in our authority and what is the impact in terms of the overall emissions output that are causing, and what we need to spend money on that other people can do that don't require money that they can regulate. And I mean, we're trying to work within our wheelhouse, but work within budget constraints, which, as you know, are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But I would like to know, what is it we can do? And that landscaping was a perfect example. But then what are the other examples of what we need to spend money at to get other people to do things where other levels of government can regulate? And that's why I'd love to see that delineation, because those are the real issues. We spend money to incentivize, or what do we have the authority to regulate? And those things, I think, I would love to have a list and see what that is and what impact we're actually going to have. Because again, spending 2% of our annual budget to impact maybe 0.4% of what Oakville's overall emissions are, we can have a good conversation about, is that money well spent? And I'm not sure where I can find that. Or do you know of any organizations doing that kind of work?
Well, I mean, I would suggest, first of all, that would be an excellent remit for a task force that would accomplish something useful. I would also suggest that you might be spending 1 or 1.5% of your budget on corporate emissions, which impact is very small. So is that money well spent? But no, I don't have, our organization doesn't have the bandwidth and the expertise to do such a sort of catalog. But I think it's highly appropriate to task experts to come up with that. That would be an excellent first step.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Hart. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar, and then Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Hart, you mentioned 4 places: Guelph, Kingston, Mississauga, Hamilton.
Right.
What are they doing? Give me just an example. I don't need to go on for 20 minutes, but example of where they're doing a much better job in an area.
Guelph, for example, they have passed enabling a bylaw to allow local improvement charges to apply to home energy retrofits. So that knocks down a significant barrier that homeowners face. Do they want to spend, whatever it is, $30,000, $50,000 on a retrofit, whether they get, a loan from the federal government? I mean, they're still responsible for it. And, you know, again, the challenge is, what if they sell their house? You know, they've got to continue to pay that off. So the local improvement charge just knocks that barrier down. And it really, you know, then enables other initiatives to have more fertile ground. And I mean, it certainly enables more of the early adopters that you always need to you know, break the trail and prove by example what's possible in terms of emissions reduction.
What's the update?
So that's one example. The other examples have to do with education, but also home energy retrofit programs. And again, they're on the smaller side, but they are again a thin edge of the wedge. It's setting examples for the rest of the community. So those are some examples. And again, I would say, you know, if town staff hasn't already done so, and I'm sure they're you know, well familiar with some of these initiatives. If there isn't, again, bandwidth on staff's part to understand that comprehensively, include that in a task force remit.
It seems the problem seems to be more of a provincial issue with building codes, because we're putting up a few thousand houses every year, and I don't think they're all heat pumps going in. I could be wrong, but I think there's still a lot of high efficiency furnaces, which are in the 90% range of efficiency now also, though.
Right.
So
Yeah, and
it's a tough one.
since the last time we spoke, we did meet with our MPP, and didn't make a lot of headway. And yes, with respect to the Ontario Building Code, Ontario is the laggard in Canada. Like, it's not likely we will have a useful building code from a energy efficiency perspective for another 10 years or so in Ontario.
Yeah, that is a big problem. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor McNeice.
Through your worship, thanks for the presentation, Hart. Very informative. So what I'm sort of hearing is more action at the residential level, and sort of stuff that we can sort of, you know, see and feel and hear to feel that we're making progress. So I just want to flag for everyone the two-stroke engines, or the leaf blowers. It can also be some lawnmowers and stuff. It's back on Toronto's radar. So I've been reading about it. July 19th, council, I believe, will make a decision at the City of Toronto on that. So, you know, and just knowing, and Hart, you can elaborate on it as well, you probably know more than I do, but my understanding is, you know, 30 minutes of running one of these two-stroke engines is the equivalent of driving a car from Toronto to Montreal and back as far as emissions go. So it's just the sort of density of emissions coming from these things that poses a problem. But so I just want to flag that for Hasten as well as our staff, that maybe we'll keep an eye on what Toronto does next week, and it could be something we consider further.
Right. And you may be aware that there is a petition in Oakville to consider phasing out these devices. And yes, the pollution is horrible. And I would also point out that it's extremely unhealthy for the employees that operate these equipment. They are breathing this really noxious air from the exhaust from these systems. So I think that should be certainly a factor to be considered, as well as the overall air pollution and noise pollution.
And I've also heard people that have experienced concussions have a hard time with the noise and things like that. But sounds like we might have an update on this later in this meeting. I'm willing to second something that Councillor Chisholm may bring forward. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Jansen.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Council, such a natural segue. Let's turn to item 9.3, the Climate Emergency Declaration Progress Report. I would encourage Councillor Chisholm to, staff are available if you have questions, but you know, it's it's a pretty detailed report. I understand that Councillor Chisholm might like to attach a suggestion or two to this thing, and if you're doing that, I would suggest that maybe you add a request for a report on the Guelph Local Improvement Charge program, so that we can evaluate A, how it works, and B, if in fact it is working, that is to say, if anybody's actually using it. I've got two other hands, but I did call you first, Councillor Chisholm, so you have the floor if you want it. Otherwise, I'm moving on to.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just trying to add this to my recommendation on the Climate Emergency Declaration Progress Report. In the body of the report, I noticed or read number 2, identity the public's role in the climate crisis and the actions that the community can do to fight climate change. And that the segue is a perfect segue with respect to what I'd like to add to the recommendation, is that staff explore a ban on small gas-powered equipment, including but not limited to leaf blowers, lawn mowers, trimmers, and edgers as a priority project in the update of the community energy strategy. And in addition, that we investigate and report back on the Guelph local improvement program in the city of Guelph.
Okay, thanks. Is everybody clear on that? I hope nobody needs it written and printed up. I think we can all keep that in our head. Councillor Hazat-Thiel and then Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Burton. So in regards to the Climate Emergency Declaration Report, I am wondering about some of the specifics. So on page 37 of our report, it talks about opportunities that were taken away from a district energy meeting that Denmark participated in and several others. Could you just give us some highlights of what those specific opportunities were?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Sorry, are you referencing the district energy workshops mentioned in the report?
Yeah, the one that was with the Danish Consulate of Toronto and Future Energy, OEC, Halton Region.
Yes.
You specify that there were opportunities to advance, and I'd like to understand what some of those opportunities were and what specifically you took away from the time.
So the workshops were focused on sharing information about 2 of Oakville's projects with stakeholders in the community. One of them was the 16-mile community center retrofit, which was evaluating district energy, and our division doesn't lead that project, so I'm not familiar with the details of it, but the other project that we were sharing was the district energy feasibility study for the hospital district. And at that time, we had just completed the pre-feasibility study report. So we had brought together stakeholders in the community, including Future Energy Oakville, Oakville Hydro, OEC, representatives from other climate teams at other municipalities, Halton Region, and then the Danish Consulate, who had also invited Danish companies to attend. And the intent of the workshops was to share information about our 2 projects and use a kind of workshop environment to brainstorm ideas for potential risks that might come up as a part of the work, risk mitigation measures, and it was also intended to be kind of like a District Energy 101 for the other municipal staff at the town staff who are involved in those projects. So we had staff from planning, engineering, facilities, and then climate action participate.
So were there specific actions that came out of the workshop?
No specific action items necessarily, but the kind of workshop component with the brainstorming did give us some kind of relevant things to consider and to embed as a part of the projects that we were working on. So, for example, the session that was focused on the district energy feasibility study, we were able to incorporate some of those ideas into the scope of work for that project, which is currently underway.
Okay. Was it yourself that participated in the Halton Municipal Climate meeting as well?
Both myself and Tricia participate in that.
So So the prior delegation talked a lot about what actions are we taking, how are we moving forward? Were there specific actions, or is there specific actions that are going to come out of that initial coming together and saying, these, you know, we have a lot to share with one another, we have a lot of ideas. Is there an action plan that's concrete with dates, times, and performance indicators that might come out of those discussions, and if so, when?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So far, we've developed a terms of reference in partnership with Halton Region and the other area municipalities. We're just in the midst of finalizing that, and it will be presented to the CAO's meeting, I believe, in September. And then the next step, we're also working on developing a work plan with some of those specifics that you mentioned.
And is there a deadline for when it comes back to council? Maybe I'll look over at the CAO or Jane.
Through you, Mayor Burton. This has been a discussion at the Halton CAO's table. And at this point in time, as Rija has indicated, it is understanding and sharing what each of the municipalities have been doing, as well as the region, in order to identify some gaps that we may have. We're coming together in a specific program would be a benefit to all of us. When you look around the Halton municipalities, each one of them are doing actually a fair amount around energy conservation, their environmental things that they move forward. So September, we expect to see that terms of reference back again. I don't expect until the new year to have an understanding through that group, bringing back to the CAO's table, what are the gaps that are in there, so that that group can then focus on the best, most appropriate thing to fill the gaps that may exist between all the programs that each one of the municipalities have going. So I would say to you in the new year, in 24.
Okay, thank you for that. And in terms of an update on FEO, when would that come?
I believe the board is, as per the service agreement, they are expected to present an update to council by the end of Q3 of 2023.
Okay. Is there going to be a time or a place where we get to measuring specifically residential emissions? I see it in the strat plan, and I know we're kind of sort of jumped to this and that, but where we're trying to really have a hard metric that at least we understand the number and can say to the public, this is our problem, this is our emergency, here's how you are involved in bringing it down. We know full well we cannot, you know, lower people's thermostats unless they're on those special plans, but is there a goal to getting there? Because I can understand, and I've gotten emails from several of the folks that are quite active in climate change saying, where's the action? Where's the metric? So is that what we're going to see either when FEO reports or in Q1 of 2024?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think you'll see it as a part of FEO's report necessarily, but the community energy strategy is planned to undergo an update in time for 2025, and that work will begin, I believe, early next year, and it would definitely be included as a part of that scope, to include, for example, interim targets as well. We've heard often from the community that that's a gap in the current strategy, so we would include that, as well as some specific KPIs like you mentioned for residential energy and even some of the other areas of the strategy. And I also just want to emphasize that residential energy is one component of the community energy strategy. I know in Oakville it's responsible for about 27% of greenhouse gas emissions, but as was pointed out earlier in the discussion, the town is limited in the ways that it can control or I guess influence the way that homeowners use energy in their homes. So it is challenging to work around. But yes, to answer your question, these things would be considered as a part of the CES update work that will begin soon.
Well, to leave on a positive, I'm appreciative that you put the heat pump information up on the website. It certainly some feedback was obviously taken from other sessions, and it's there. I hope we hear the frustration of the public, because when I hear lines like, well, we don't have control over a lot of things, but we do have a lot of influence in terms of inspiring and giving people the insights, and data speaks volumes. So I hope we can move forward in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara, then Councillor McNeice.
Thank you, Your Worship. I got to be honest, I'm trying to follow the bouncing ball here, because I know our previous delegate was delegating on 2 items, and I know you said that segues nice into 9.3, but I don't recall us. Are we merging 9.2 and 9.3, or have we dealt with 9.2? I'm not really sure where we are right now.
I'm planning to call a vote on the strat plan when we finish this segue, and then I'd vote on this item, or segue as I'm calling it. Is that all right with you?
Well, so I've got questions on 9.2 and 9.3. I should just have at both of them right now then? Is that what I'm understanding, or?
Would you please?
Okay. Okay, so 9.2, the strat plan. From what I heard from the BIA delegate, really, I think speaks to the vibrancy issue that we have brought forward in our mission statement. I don't see anything on events here in our mission statement, in our strategic plan. And I think we need to be more forceful with that. And I think we need to actually literally say, in our action plan, we will bring forward events to bring some vibrancy to the town. So I'm not sure if that's sort of buried somewhere that I didn't see, but I'd like to have that a little more explicitly written out. The other thing, and I think the mayor touched on whether certain things fit in infrastructure or not. Again, asset control is something in Brawny in particular, the Brawny Outer Harbor, and we continue to sort of labor on with this, and the federal government with the Compass building is delaying, these things are delaying. But if it's not in our priorities and in our action plan, then it's in no plan at all. So I'm wondering where that is in our plan, where we are focusing on that, and where we are going to push over the 3 years that we have to ensure that it's not sitting on a federal government agent's desk somewhere, and our staff are not pushing on that. So for 9.2, I'd like for staff to maybe hit that, and then I can switch to 9.3 if that's okay.
Ms. Clark.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In the action plan for the strategy under community belonging, we do have a deliverable of a special events plan. I would suggest that the work that's going to be underway on that would include any consideration for a downtown BIA event. So it would fall under that. Regarding the Bronte Harbor, that is a current intergovernmental priority for us, and staff do continue to work on that. So while it's not expressly included in the strategic plan, it is one of our key priorities, and we are bringing an updated report on all of our intergovernmental priorities for the August council meeting, so you would see that there.
Okay, so I appreciate that, and maybe I wasn't sort of expressing of it. It wasn't necessarily that I want the downtown BIA to make sure that their project is in the strat plan. I guess it's that events, including Brawny, Kerr, North Oakville events, sui genre are included in our strat plan, and not just downtown Oakville. Although I'm all for it. I think it's a great thing. So just if we can make sure we've encapsulated that. And I guess my comment again, well, it was specific to the Brawny Outer Harbor. I think it speaks more to strategic asset ascertainment. An eco park came from I don't know where, but we pounced on it and we got it. Deerfield came, we pounced on it, we got it. What is our strategic plan for asset acquisition, whether it's the former Greb lands, whether it's other lands out there? Do we have a plan? Do we have a pathway to pursue these things? Is it a part of our strategic plan that we at least express that if strategic lands come up, we will grab them as assets. I'm a little more interested in the larger sort of conversation about asset attainment, and moving on it as quickly as possible, rather than just, obviously Bronny's top of mind for me, but maybe you can speak a little bit more to that. That would be great.
Well, Councillor, before the CAO helps you out here, I'd like to just remind you that we've received the approvals for the Brownie Outer Harbor transfer to the town from both senior levels of government. The only holdup now is the belated discovery by them that they need to do Indigenous consultation before they can hand it over. So you probably can't call it pouncing on it, but I can certainly tell you that for 17 years, we've been working very hard to get it back. I made a commitment to former Mayor Harry Barrett that we would do that, and I'm as frustrated as you are by how long it's taking. Madam CAO.
I appreciate those comments on the Bronny Outer Harbor, Your Worship. Thank you.
So in terms of the acquisition strategy, that was a direction from council that came out of the Parks Plan that had come in front of council. I think it was in September of 22, where there was a direction that we initiate an acquisition strategy. And so we are working on that currently, that would identify assets that we would need to acquire, and so that we can have a more proactive approach in terms of exploring what are those areas in town where we need to acquire lands. Certainly the harbor. I can, further to the mayor's comments, we have been working on that consistently in order to try and move that forward as much as we can in order to get those lands as quickly as possible. But that is the current status on the harbor lands. So I would suggest to you there's an acquisition strategy that is well underway. We have terms of reference that I think are out right now in order to be able to put together that acquisition strategy for all the assets that the towns will need. That would include parks, that would include transportation, that would include other recreational type of facilities that we need to ensure that we have land available to accommodate.
Okay, I appreciate that, Madam CAO. I guess, I mean, what we plan for and what becomes available are two different things. And I think Councillor McNeese forwarded along the Pioneer gas station at Bronny and Lakeshore, which was up for sale not too long ago, which is right in front of a cenotaph, which is right beside our market, and it was a prime opportunity for the town to go, is this something that we should be looking at into adding to our inventory? And I just don't know how those decisions are made. I don't know whether staff sort of go, yeah, this is there, this came up, it wasn't a part of our plan, but we focus on it, or how do we deal with those opportunities that come up in front of us?
So generally we deal with them in terms of looking out to see what properties are available in order to accommodate the needs we have. The example that you have provided is one that we are pursuing currently, because there's very few opportunities for parking within Bronte, so it's not something that we would forego. So from a staff perspective, we are looking at that. We do have some opportunities on that particular site, and that would be a similar approach that we would apply to any property that comes up and available. So it's an active review of properties that are available, but it also, through our master plans, we're looking at what sites that we need to actively acquire that may not be actually on the market. So I think those are the two opportunities. We identify what we need through our master plans and pursue those through the recommendations that come out of those plans. And at the same time, we're actively looking at what is on the market so that we can acquire those at the right time. And that acquisition strategy is the strategy or plan that will help support that overall approach. And council will certainly be seeing that plan when it's pulled together.
That's great. I look forward to seeing that. Thank you very much. That's great news. So Your Worship, if I can just switch to 9.3 while I'm here, I just have a couple of quick questions. And it actually came out of Mr. Jensen's delegations, is if staff wouldn't mind actually figuring out what our emissions breakdown in Oakville is and what where our sources are coming from, that I think that would be very helpful. If we have that ability or not, I'm not sure, or maybe we have that information already. Do we know that?
Councillor, we can provide you the community energy plan that was generated with the creation of the Community Energy Task Force. If we give our attention to staff now, they can assure you that we have those estimates. As another counselor pointed out, it's measuring them is another matter, but estimates are used based on normal equipment and normal loads. Staff would like to pick that up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor O'Meara, approximately 50% of emissions in Oakville are from the transportation sector, and then 27% from residential energy use, and about 25% from the institutional, commercial, and industrial sector.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you very much for that. And just lastly, what do we have a comprehensive fleet transition plan? Like, I know we're working on our electric buses, which is great. I know pickup trucks, we might not be there with EVs yet, but I know a lot of other vehicles in town that staff drive might not be electric. Do we have a plan on how we're going to completely transition over to all of that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we do. We have already a number of electric vehicles in our fleet. We also have a transition plan for our small equipment fleet as well. But there are operational challenges with that equipment where we can't fully move into a full electrification of our small fleet. That's our handheld devices, leaf blowers, and whatnot. But yes, we do have a plan to where it is feasible. We are shifting to that.
Would it be possible to share that plan with council and timelines? Or I mean, I get leaf blowers. I mean, technology is where it is. If we don't have the technology to do things, I completely get that. But I mean, if we have a plan where at some point we no longer have a 4-door vehicle that's a gas powered one, because that technology is there, do we have a plan by 2030 we will be done, we will have no more? If we can share that plan, that would be outstanding.
Commissioner Fu did point out for me just now that the electric vehicle plan is a part of the strategic plan. So that is one of the action items that are included. We do have, I would have to take that back in terms of actual dates, because as I said, as our fleet ages and we have to renew it, we do take a look at, is there cost? Is there the opportunity to shift to electric? Some of that depends on cost, but also operational viability. So I would need to go back on a set date, but as I said, there are some still hurdles that we need to get past before we can fully transition, and some of that, just the market is not ready for that yet. So I don't have a date, but I can certainly pull some information on the fleet renewal plan.
No, that's perfect. And even for the next report, I'm not trying to have a gotcha moment here. I'm just trying to see that we're on task and we're on a plan. And you know, I think we all know the cost overruns we saw with the electric buses, and you know, these things are going to cost money. And I think that's a good discussion for council to have. You know, I know cost always factors in with staff and with council, but that should be a decision we make, right? If we've got a plan and it's going to cost, maybe we can get there eventually. But thank you very much for that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor McNeice.
Through your worship, just a quick comment on 9.2 and 9.3. So 9.2 with the strategic plan, building on what Councillor O'Meara was talking about with the Compass building and the waterfront. I think in this term of council, if that's potentially, you know, could get closer or come under our ownership, that we should really be looking at the whole Bronte waterfront. And with our renewed vision of vibrancy and community for all, it's only getting busier. We have more and more residents, a lot from the north that want to connect with the water, and we want to welcome them as well. Largely the west side of the waterfront where the Metro Marina building is protected, but doesn't have an active, vibrant use to it, aside from storing boats. You know, we're trying to accommodate some parking and a few other things there, but I've heard some really great visions from residents about, you know, what we could do with that space. You know, we've got a yacht club, we've got a historic building, a lot of space in between. So I would love to see, as part of this action plan, I think it would be very timely in this term of council, that we look at Bronte's waterfront as a whole and look at how do we connect it better, how do we revitalize it and make it more vibrant, if that seems feasible. I don't know if there's any comment from staff, if that's possible to get that on the list here.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I would suggest that the Parks and Rec Master Plan, that's an element, so that will be flushed out through that plan. And I think you'll see more coming out of it, which will then enable us to look more closely within that broader context of the master plan to then look more closely at the Bronte. So I would suggest to you that it's included in here, not the specific mention, but the general Parks and Rec Master Plan and our approach to that would very much incorporate.
And I appreciate that. And there's the Harbors Master Plan as well, which is sort of a part of that. I mean, I'd love to see it called out sort of like the downtown cultural hub, just so that we give it that emphasis and focus. I mean, we've sort of had a lot of half starts with stuff down there. And I mean, there's just so much opportunity and it's only getting busier and busier. And if we don't get a plan in place, we can't get in front of it. You know, we've got 3 sides that aren't connected that, you know, we've been talking about since I was born on how we could improve the waterfront and make connections. And I think we really have an opportunity here. So I'll leave it at that. And then on 9.3, I'd just like to offer a bit of an amendment to Councillor Chisholm's motion there. And that would be sort of on the, I guess, natural scape side of things. So I'm sort of reading up on Toronto, and I believe they're also looking at approaches to landscaping that would cut down on the need for high-powered blowers. So could the leaves be used as mulch a little bit more? Do we have to get every speck of dust off the sidewalk and, you know, stuff like that? Because if the need is lower, then it's a lot easier to get a quieter, lighter electric tool as a replacement. So if that could be explored and what other municipalities might be doing to decrease the need for, you know, mass leaf blower use and other things, sort of look at it from the, I guess, the demand side there, and maybe better understanding customer or residents' expectations with it. So if that's, I don't know, amenable as a amendment, so, okay. Thank you.
Councillor, could I offer this phrasing and to the first part of Councillor Chisholm's motion after the words strategy, and options to reduce the need to use these forms of equipment?
I'd agree to that, thank you.
All right. I want to go back to 9.2 after our segue to 9.3. I'd like to invite you, I think you're ready to make a decision on 9.3, and we have a motion from Councillor Chisholm, so I'd like to ask if there's any objection to the proposal by Councillor Chisholm.
Sorry, yours, can I don't see the motion by Councillor Chisholm. I apologize.
You may not have heard him. He's adding.
I did hear it, but I can't retain it in my head that well. Is there a way I can see it?
Councillor, I guess you didn't hear me thank everybody for not needing that. Can I try to read it to you? Because it's really simple.
Okay.
That staff explore a ban on small gas-powered equipment, including but not limited to leaf blowers, lawnmowers, trimmers, and edgers, as a priority project in the update to the community energy strategy and options to reduce the need to use those forms of equipment. And then the second part was to report on the operation and success or progress of the Guelph Local Improvement Charge program that our delegate promoted to us. Are you okay with those things?
Yeah, I'm as an exploratory exercise, I'm always okay. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Hasleteel, you have your hand up. Is that because you object, or can I call this vote?
Yeah, my hand was up before I knew that you were going to call this vote. So yes, call this vote, and I'll put my hand down and put it back up.
Any objection left? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. Councillor Chisholm, congratulations. Oh, wait, we have an objection from staff?
Mayor Burton, if it would assist, we can actually provide an update on the Guelph program right now.
Let's just put it in the report.
Okay.
We can all look it up, but it'd be great to have a staff report, because that way the public gets to see it too.
Look how fast we're moving now.
Yeah, boy. All right, Madam Clerk, there's no objection, that motion carries. And now we're going back to 9.2, and here, I'm looking for either the indicated motion that the action plan be approved, or a motion that approves it and adds under infrastructure the downtown cultural hub, the town square, and the parking for Kerr, Bronte, and downtown that I think we all agree is needed, the streetscapes for Bronte and Kerr, and the work on a comprehensive plan for the Bronte harbors. I think that would capture, those are the notes I took of the various things that people raised. Councillor, how's the deal?
So I would concur with those suggestions that you've made, but I have three others, and again, just because I wasn't sure where we were at, but under environmental sustainability, if we could add green building standards, explore green building standards, and tracking approved development proposals that incorporate green and sustainability. It's a good indicator of progress. And I think that just starts to move us a little bit further along.
Well, that's a very inspired idea, because several developments north of Dundas are now doing district energy, and they are also doing remarkably green building standards in what they're building.
So we'd have an opportunity to recognize, celebrate, and track.
We might want to give them a prize.
So those are the two that I'd like to add to what you suggested. And I just have a point of clarification that I'm looking for. On green, under climate change, there's a measure that green area per 100,000. And I just want clarity. Is that green, or is that what the parks plan said was green? Because promenades were counted as parks. They are not green. And I just want to make sure what we are really measuring when we say green area per 100,000.
Well, while they confer, Councillor, I hope I understand you to be proposing all of those things, not just your three, or those two, rather.
I'm supporting what you said. I added those other elements, and I just
Perfect.
want clarity that
Perfect. I
is
was looking for a
green
sponsor
per
for those
100,000 green, or does it include hardscape, which, so what's the formula? And you can even report back later. I'd like to know it's green.
Not just paint.
Is Commissioner Bell on the line?
Councillor, I think a better way is to say, Council would like that report to be only green space. If that's your wish, I mean, rather than fencing over it.
Well, then go for it.
That's fine.
So
I like your suggestions, Mayor Burton.
I can share, if helpful, we did bring back the suggestion from the last meeting about usable green space. We were having difficulty defining it and measuring it accurately. So I do know the preferred measure from staff is green space. Whether that includes every piece of green that you mentioned, I would have to confirm that.
So for clarity, my concern is that hardscape could get included in that green space measurement, and that isn't really what the public would like us to achieve.
Can I suggest that we come back with how that is measured? Because
Perfectly
I
fine.
mean, I think of some of the North Oakville parks I'm thinking of may have a hard component to that park, and so how do we begin to split that down? So it's a bit of a measuring challenge for us, and so if we can kind of look at that, understanding that you want a measurement of the predominant green space, shall I say, that's actually green in color, then we'll take that away and figure out how to sort that through.
Well, it would be, I think we all agree, it would be unfortunate if our definition of green space was so tight that playgrounds didn't count and slides and swing sets didn't count.
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, I'm happy for you to bring it back, but I would like to have some clarity on what the formula of how it's being calculated. So we know what we're aiming at.
All right.
Excluding concrete and asphalt, probably.
Well,
Let them bring it back and tell us
basketball
that.
courts in the park, you're going to move them out? So see, it gets.
Yeah.
So staff are right to remind us that we also want, I mean, this council has bent over backwards to build basketball courts and skate parks.
Pickleball.
And so, you know, let's not sabotage ourselves.
No, just want to make sure what we're measuring. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna include play space. Like if there's a park that's got a skate park in it, we're not deducting the skate park. Good, well then we're all on the same page, I think. And we'll now move to Councilor O'Meara and Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just I had mentioned townwide events in the strategic priorities, and I think that might fit under community belonging, where we talk about inclusion, belonging, engaging residents, and sort of townwide events. I think it's important to have that in our strategic priorities as we go through our event strategy, but just so that we keep our eye on the prize, that's part of our vibrancy, and it's something that we're aiming to do.
All right, Ms. Clark, did you say that that's already there, or is it not already there?
So there is an events plan already noted in the action plan.
Councilor, is that all right?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I get lost in the pages. If it's there, it's there. I'll take your word for it. No problem. I was just looking at the high level strategic priorities and said, I don't see it. But if it's buried underneath, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, then we're getting closer to happy. Councilor Adams and then Councilor Chisholm.
Since we're adding specific things that we're trying to add in, I would like to add under the green space land acquisition plan, the acquisition of the parkway land, which is a long-standing set of lands that we've been trying to acquire.
All right, Councilor Haslett-Field, do you have an objection to that?
We have a parks plan acquisition that is holistic, that's supposed to be coming back to us in Q4. And I mean, if the councillor would agree that we have a parks plan acquisition strategy that's supposed to come to us, and it should be all encompassing rather than specific to a certain park, I would.
Well, and you know what, while you were talking, I'm reminded, council has already authorized, and I have already notified the provincial government that we want it as a park. So I think you're actually already covered by previous actions.
That's true. We're adding a bunch of things that I think we've already mentioned. Like we already want the downtown cultural hub, and we already want the town square. And
I'm with the councillor. If she wants to, I mean, I don't have an objection to adding it. I mean, it kind of opens a weird avenue.
I just feel like it opens the door to everybody. They are things that, you're right, the Downtown Cultural Hub was already on it. It was just moving over to growth rather than in community belonging. Town Square is just being called out. I guess I could see that as a separate, none of us have sat down and gone, here are parks we want to acquire based on the vacant land that might be available, because we're awaiting that parks acquisition plan and understanding where the land vacancies are.
This one is a little different, Councillor, in that council has already endorsed getting it for a park and already told the province that we'll buy it for a park. So maybe it does fit the same profile as Downtown Cultural Hub.
So it has a financial approval like Town Square did? Just for clarity?
No, in that case, we have a parkland acquisition reserve fund that would cover it handsomely. So we and we don't have a negotiated price.
So what is the wording we're putting in that?
He just wanted to add the parkway lands as acquisition of parkway lands as a park. I believe, if I'm not stating it wrong. Look, I tell you what, we have, I hope, a motion from Councillor Haslett-Field for the things that that she has said. Councillor Adams, it's in order for you to amend that to move an amendment to that, and you don't need a seconder, we're in committee of the whole. And I accept that you've moved that as an amendment. Is there an objection to adding that to the motion? There's no objection, so it's in the motion now. Councillor Chisholm, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. There's a lot of discussion on special events. Just for clarity and just to hopefully to bring us up to speed, I see that Colleen Bell is online. I understand we're having a special event strategy being performed as we stand. And I guess the question is, when is that coming forward? So I just need clarity on that.
Commissioner Bell?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the strategy would be coming forward next year, mid-year. So we need to tie it into the Parks Rec Library Master Plan as well, so that it's properly aligned. And also, if we needed to acquire land, as an example, for some sort of special event space, we'd want that strategy in place as well. So we need all those pieces together.
So again, this is in the process, and our strategic plan is indicated special events, so it's all in process. So I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Much so.
Good stuff. And that leaves Councillor Hazard-Thiel's hand. Councillor Hazard-Thiel. All right. Then I think we've reached a point where we can make a decision. Is there any objection to the motion to approve the strat plan and enumerate the various items as specified by Councillor Hazard-Thiel and Councillor Adams? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and so that's carried. Thank you, everybody. Let's stay on the environmental theme for just a second. I understand from Councillor Chisholm that he might have, we have two registered delegations on the townwide rainwater management strategy update, and I understand from Councillor Chisholm that he may like to defer this as not quite ready for prime time. But I would still urge that we listen to the delegations.
Your Worship, the reason for my motion to defer, after you hear the presentations from the residents, I think it's very clear in the report there is some lacks and gaps that we need to reconsider.
All righty.
Thank you.
Okay, so the delegations, assuming that's what they want to, may be happier delegations than they might have been. Madam Clerk, would you please call the registered delegations?
The first registered delegation is Nagin Fichkowski.
Thank you.
Oh, hello. Welcome, Ms. Fichkowski. We look forward to your information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, my name is Nagin Fichkowski, and I'm a resident of Oakville and an engineer by trade. I own and operate a consulting firm in Oakville, aiming to achieve climate resiliency in our community. I also serve on a number of advisory boards and committees to advance and effectively mobilize scientific knowledge in this field. I'd like to highlight a few concerns to the agenda item 9.4, townwide rainwater management strategy updates. First and foremost, in reviewing the council report, I understand one intent is to ensure compliance with the new legislation under the Asset Management Planning for Municipal Infrastructure Act. I quote from this report that the new legislation not only requires that the municipality identifies long-term life cycle needs for renewal of assets, but also that a climate lens be applied where developing these plans. Unfortunately, the rainwater management strategy fails to address either requirements, as it appears to ignore the ecological and economic cost of gray infrastructure in identifying the life cycle needs, and therefore failing to apply a climate lens in its full form. The report indicates this strategy protects both our natural assets and stormwater infrastructure, yet it lacks any formal inclusion or pathway for inclusion of green infrastructure in the plan. The educational materials provided are misleading in representing the water flow from local ditches and streams into the catch basin and eventually our waterways. The risks associated with property damages are disproportionately represented, not quantifiable measures are provided. Therefore, the information cannot be deemed sufficient for a resident like myself to justify the fee structure proposed. Lastly, there is no formal declaration or specification for prioritizing enhancement of natural infrastructure over replacing them with gray infrastructure. There are various evidence-based methods and techniques readily available to ensure the needs of our township is met using green techniques. If without the direction in this strategy, the risk of maladaptation is high. Next page, please. To elaborate further on the need for considering the ecological and economic cost of our conventional stormwater assets during life cycle planning, the following items are important to consider. Many areas of our town are currently in possession of green infrastructure such as open ditches or swales. A great amount of stormwater that falls during a rain or storm event is absorbed or captured and redirected by these abundant green elements. As the water is carried away, it is also filtered naturally to a great extent that in many cases meets runoff water quality standards. Adding gray features, or worse, replacing the green elements with gray ones like gutters would force the runoff to be directed to a destination that may not handle the flow well. This not only increases the stress on municipal infrastructure, but can also result in horrible environmental consequences and reduced water quality. There are various other known downfalls with gray infrastructure, such as the high emission contributions, substantial maintenance costs, and associated budget deficits that have resulted in national and international movement away from the conventional methods and towards more nature-inclusive solutions. A major downfall being the loss of habitat that has already cost us critical biodiversity loss in the region. Next page, please. Lastly, gray infrastructure scores very low as a resilient and adaptive solution to climate change, particularly given the likely scenarios for a shoreline township like ours. The interventions imposed in areas that are naturally managing the storm runoff interrupts ecosystem services, which can have long-term irreversible damages for the environment. Next page, please. So as an alternative, I believe we better invest in prioritizing protection of our green assets and implementing low-impact development solutions wherever natural assets may be insufficient. The expenses and fees may be better spent on piloting and leading innovative nature-based solutions that are in harmony with our natural environment in Oakville and designed with nature to restore ecosystems, ecosystem services, reverse biodiversity loss, manage water, and tackle the negative impacts of climate change on our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the time you took to bring those very interesting observations. Councillor Elgar has a question for you, and then Councillor O'Meara, you could yet see every member of council. Councillor Elgar.
So thank you. Through Mayor Burton, thank you very much for the presentation. So I'm looking at your degree, your P-Eng, I understand, but the MEPP, what is that?
It is a master's degree in engineering and public policy.
Okay. Sounds pretty impressive. It sounds like you really know what you're talking about. Thank you very much for coming and taking the time to prepare this. We appreciate it, or I do anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you very much. It's conversations that I've had through numerous encounters with some of the work I do with the Great Lake St. Lawrence Cities Initiative as well in terms of water restoration, these things. But a lot of the major engineering firms, Stantec, and a lot of ones who are doing green infrastructure and green landscape architecture in built-up areas, they've stated that in many places we've moved beyond mitigation and we can only deal with adaptation. I guess would you say that there are areas of town that are sort of they've been developed and we don't have any other choice but to use sort of infrastructure, or that do you think there's a solution of green infrastructure for all of our rainwater problems, or where do you is it all of one, or is there do you think we need a mix of both, or what's your comments on that?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think I don't have a specific information, but I do think that overall having a hybrid package of solutions would potentially work better. Our very close neighbor in Mississauga, they have already started developing massive infrastructure for stormwater management, and it has been looking successful for quite a while now. So one of the major concerns, however, would be transitioning away from green infrastructures as opposed to, just moving more so towards it.
Sorry, so would your approach be green infrastructure wherever and whenever possible, but where not possible, gray infrastructure is the best we can do, or no gray infrastructure at all?
The first option, for sure.
Okay.
So green infrastructure as priority, and the default procedures for the engineering department, and where not possible and the risk is too high, then a combination of green and gray infrastructure.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm sure our staff agree with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haslett-Thiel, and then Councillor McNeice.
Thank you very much for coming out. Could we possibly get a copy of your slides? Some of those are just amazingly clear to understand, and so it'd be great to have them. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councillor McNeice.
Through your worship, thanks as well for your presentation, very informative. I've also seen some green infrastructure problems that I think are sort of to maybe another level, or probably levels that you've seen. I've seen bioswales that can drain a 1 acre parking lot and they only take up 5% of the space. It was a project I was working on, and the reason why we did it is it was a lot cheaper. So have you seen with green infrastructure project, there's actually a cost savings to doing some of these things. Underground infrastructure is very expensive, and I think we all agree a hybrid approach is needed at this point with climate change and many other things. But curious about your experience with potential cost savings to some of these new innovative ideas, whether it's a green parking lot or an extensive bioswale. What are your thoughts on that?
Cost is a little bit of an issue, mainly because of the structures we currently have for financing. When you look at the cost assessments for nature-based solutions, you're looking at a longer term basically return on investment, which is not what we are very used to, right? But in a longer run, there are various reports that show that from a maintenance perspective and a general ROI, it is a more cost-effective option.
And then from an environmental, if we do the full cost accounting from an environmental benefits perspective, it's dramatically cost savings, yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, very much for your information.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Pamela Knight, the president of the Coronation Park Residents Association.
Welcome, Ms. Knight. We'll pause for a second while technology hooks us up. Hello. We see you very well, and we hear you too. Please begin.
Perfect, excellent. If I could have my first slide up, please. First of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight and to share our comments. First slide, please. So we had an opportunity to review the rainwater management strategy. We also had a look at our asset management plan. We feel that, first of all, that there's been insufficient communication and engagement with the public. A majority of people are absolutely not aware that Oakville is considering a stormwater fee at all. There's also no formal identification or inclusion of green infrastructure in the plan, and it appears that no investigation has been undertaken to determine how their increased role in stormwater management could represent cost savings over the years ahead. Without meaningful inclusion of additional green infrastructure and our natural municipal assets into our plans, strategies, practices, and programs, we could not support such a fee. Next slide, please. Thank you. Like everyone else in North America, Oakville has relied on gray infrastructure for decades. And now, of course, as we've grown, we've continued to add more and more gray infrastructure. Now, many of the older systems are aging. They're in need of repair or replacement. The rainwater runoff that's in this gray infrastructure is full of pollutants from roads, from rooftops, and other services, and they're piped directly to Lake Ontario. Newer approaches to drainage and water management, as our previous delegate mentioned, has created a better understanding of what we're possible to do. And we're of a mind that it's time for change. Next slide. I included this slide because I think that most of you are well aware of the differences between gray infrastructure and green. However, there may be some people watching this evening that are not fully informed and might like a bit of an explanation. So on the left, we've got gray infrastructure, which comprises mainly pipes, gutters, drains, and retention basins. And as I just said, it pipes it off to the lake. On the right is our green infrastructure, which is a broad category that sort of breaks down into, as you can see, 3 areas. Natural assets, which of course we have here in Oakville. Then enhanced assets, things that we've been talking about already, bioswales and rain gardens, stormwater ponds, which we have, of course, in Ward 7. And then there's the engineered side, which would be, again, things we've already touched on, permeable pavement at the home level, rain barrels, for instance. Next slide. So in addition to our network of gray infrastructure, we also have what are called natural green assets or municipal natural assets. And these M&A systems currently reside in the form of remnant channels, ditches, swales, and watercourses that traverse alongside roads, within parks, our natural areas, urban forests, and so on. And they work to provide stormwater flows and controls, conveyance, pollution removal. Natural assets are ecosystem features that provide or could be restored to provide services just like the engineered assets that we've been using. But historically, they haven't been considered on an equal footing or included in asset management plans. And once again, we think that that needs to change. In addition to a proven monetary value, our municipal natural assets provide biodiversity, climate resilience, air quality improvement, and so on. Next slide, please. We checked the regulation that we file our asset management plans, the municipality does, with the province, and we checked there and determined that our green assets are indeed acceptable parts of those management plans. However, it appears that Oakville's asset management plan carries no mention of our green infrastructure assets. As we've kept adding to our network of gray infrastructure, we haven't introduced any green development standards, for instance, that would require new construction to have things like permeable pavement, green roofs, on-site bioretention, and any other aspects that are aimed at reducing runoff. Every time we urbanize a street and pave over our ditches, we're depleting our natural municipal assets and their ability to catch, clean, and control stormwater. We can find no evidence that suggests Oakville is undertaking activities to identify and prioritize streets with gray infrastructure that could be retrofit with green infrastructure. Oakville doesn't appear to have built-in guidelines to facilitate the integration of green rainwater infrastructure in some of the projects that we have, such as parks and recreational spaces. And we can't find any established targets to reduce rainwater inputs into the sewer network. Next slide, please. There are a huge number of resources that we can draw on as a municipality. Green Infrastructure Ontario, for instance, has a municipal hub. In the US, the EPA has a great website that has a range of digital modeling tools. There are cost models, lots of links to various companies that service municipalities. The Great Lakes Commission has an optimization tool for stormwater management. Credit Valley Conservation has a body called Sustainable Technologies. And as a council, we have a very valuable tool, resource in Councillor Adams, who happens to be the Credit Valley Conservation Board Chair. So I suspect that he would love to hook us up with Sustainable Technologies. Toronto has Green Streets technical guidelines. And I'm going to just jump to the last one, Southwest Environmental Finance, which is in the States as well. But they specialize in helping municipalities figure out asset management practices that deal with green infrastructure. And lastly is the City of Vancouver. They have a One Water project, which with a performance target to capture and clean a minimum of 90% of Vancouver's average annual rainfall. Pretty impressive stuff. Next slide, please. This again goes to Vancouver's One Water. I've shared a number of excerpts from their information, and I can only recommend that we all visit there. It's what they have managed to achieve in about 4 years' time is really quite outstanding. And there is all sorts of information, resources, projects, great stuff there that's totally of use to everyone. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, before we set out to establish a stormwater fee, let's establish how we can enhance what we do with our natural green assets. Let's make green infrastructure standard practice in all our capital projects. Let's build in green infrastructure as part of our development, public space, and park designs. And if we're going to spend money on a consultant, let's make it one that can move us forward in protecting the green assets we have and developing the new green infrastructure that we need. That concludes my remarks, and thanks so much for listening.
Thank you very much for all the work you did and the time you took to bring that to us. Councillor Chisholm would like to lead off the questions. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to commend Pam on her excellent presentation. It really brings forth with respect to our green. We have to start to green up our assets with respect to rainwater and stormwater. I understand we do have gray structure, but I think we start thinking in a different lens, and part of an equal base with gray, we have to look at the green opportunities. I think with the two presentations, it's very clear that we're lacking that in the report. I think we need to do more work, due diligence in that part of the report and move forward. So again, as I indicated earlier, I'd like to defer this till we have some further information on the green and to answer those questions that have been that is brought forward by the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Your motion's in order, and I've recognized it earlier. The CAO would like a word. Madam CAO.
Mayor, members of council, the two presentations were excellent presentations. Green infrastructure is something that we've looked at as a municipality. In fact, we were one of the first ones that took on a natural asset program in either 17 or 18, which looked at how we could actually quantify for the David Suzuki Foundation what are the benefits of using a natural asset. It is, as the speaker had said, a much longer term program, but we were one of those pilot projects that did that. So the two presentations were excellent. But the reason I stand is because I think we need to explain what is in front of you today. What is in front of you today is a rainwater management strategy. And if I can try and explain that strategy, what it is doing is looking at, we need to look comprehensively at all the ways in which water is generated, moved, creates erosion, creates stormwater, more comprehensively. What we've done in the past is looked at it when new development has come in. We've looked at how the stormwater is generated from that, applied some standards, but we've never taken that broad approach. And so what this strategy is trying to do is look very broad at stormwater, and then each one of the particular projects that go forward, because, for example, we've done the McCraney Creek study and looked at that. We've done the Joshua Creek down in Ward 3. So there's been we've done the harbor front and what we need in order in terms of the harbor front. So each one of those studies, which is about the what, and that is how you apply the green infrastructure into those projects. Each one of those projects themselves has a whole consultation program with them. It has a whole analysis that what is the mix between green and hard infrastructure so that we can get the best out of both of those things, with certainly looking at green infrastructure as the first place forward. So each one of those projects then come together so that council has an understanding is what as a totality is your challenge in dealing with stormwater, erosion, river, what's generated from the development. So then that strategy gives you what are your priorities? Where are you going to spend your money in terms of improving it? Because you have a $600 million deficit sitting in this stormwater plan. It is too much for us to spend on a tax base. So the sole purpose of this report is not to deal with the what and happens in each one of those, because each one of those studies are subject to that analysis. It's to say, let us begin to look at a stormwater fee, because we are never going to be able, even if we employed, and I think Councillor O'Meara's comments about green infrastructure is applied, but we have reached the point where you can't just do green infrastructure. There needs to be a hard element component. We might have that mix a little bit wrong in those studies that we have. We might have it a lot wrong. But even if we have it a lot wrong, you still have a total amount of dollars to be spent on stormwater that you cannot accommodate in your tax regime without increasing taxes substantially. So the sole purpose of this report is to say, let us begin to investigate a stormwater fee. If we have that additional funding, we're better able to apply it to the natural and the hard infrastructure as we come forward with each of those individual studies, because those individual studies are going to determine the balance between the natural and the hard. So if there's wording in the recommendation that will help make that a little bit clearer, I think that would be a good thing. But the longer we wait to start that work and get going on the stormwater fee, the less money we're going to have to actually deal with a significant challenge that we have in the municipality, and every municipality has it.
Okay. Madam CAO, thank you very much for the intervention. You raised very, very good points, but so have the delegations and the councillor. I would like to float a suggestion for council's consideration to try to have the best of both worlds here. Rather than endorsing a fee as part of a rainwater management strategy, and rather than proceeding in the development of a stormwater fee and reporting back with an update on the type of fee and recommended structure, perhaps we could make more explicit in Councillor Chisholm's motion to defer that we're deferring it in order to see a rainwater management strategy plan that makes best possible use of green infrastructure and gray infrastructure where necessary, and to cost that, give us that cost estimate. Because the feedback we've had from the public and from council is that we haven't hit that mark on the sketch of a rainwater strategy that we have before us. So, so what I'm suggesting is that the deferral would be for a more detailed and perhaps rebalanced, you know, I'm keying off of your, we might have it a lot wrong. I don't think you have it a lot wrong, but I think we all sense that the balance could be adjusted. And with that, we would then have a grounds to consider a fee. You follow what I think council follows what I'm saying. Can you live with that?
Mayor Burton, members of council, I would suggest that you may want to look at a recommendation. And actually, I would ask you, could I take it offline for a moment with the commissioner in order to look at an alternative recommendation for you, which one emphasizes a principle that we need to maximize green infrastructure as a first instance in the work that we do throughout the strategy. Because what I was trying to say, and obviously I didn't say it well enough, was how we apply green infrastructure is in each one of the individual studies. The rainwater strategy is just the overall. And so a principle of the rainwater strategy would suggest that you have endorsed is that you maximize the amount of green infrastructure, which could be reflected in this recommendation, and that staff begin to explore a stormwater fee in order to address the upcoming issues in the individual studies that are coming forward. Perhaps that's an alternative.
So are you suggesting that whether it's green or gray, we can't afford it unless we have some other revenue?
Yes.
Worship, just a point of order on that. I totally agree with it. We're going to have that. We're looking for $639 million over 30 years. I totally understand that. What I'm suggesting, there's 2 points. We're looking at putting a fee on, which we haven't had any public engagement or discussion with that I understand at this point in time. We haven't had that.
Oh, and if I can clarify, this does not suggest a fee putting on now. It's suggesting us to go out and do the work. And that would include our full consultation program.
So you're endorsing it. So what we're saying is that will happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, it has to happen.
All right. So I guess the other part of it in the presentations, we need to identify this in the report. It is as a balancing the gray structure. When I read this report, it's omitted. It needs to be the due diligence on that end. We need to change the way we think, and I think being innovative that's what we need to do. And I totally agree. There's a balance, but we have to tell our public that we are being innovative, and our mindsets are changing. And we're not the traditional way of gray infrastructure. Just fix it and move on. We're looking at better ways of doing it. And I think that's what needs to be expressed in the report. That's where I'm coming from, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. We have 3 more speakers. What I'm going to propose is that we take a 10-minute bio break for the staff to work on an alternative proposal. And before I declare that we're in recess for that purpose, I want to just check with Councillor Elgar, Councillor O'Meara, and Councillor Adams that what they want to say could wait. And if it can't, we'll go to you first. Okay, Councillor Elgar is going to wait. Councillor O'Meara?
Yeah, Your Worship, before we start talking about alternative reports, we haven't even discussed whether we're okay with this report as a council. From what I've heard from the CAO and from what I have dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of residents whose basements are underwater. And every month they call me saying, what are you doing? There is no delay for me in Ward 1. And from what I'm hearing, this isn't, we put the cart before the horse. We're talking about green and gray and these things. This is just to study what we need. And we already know we're in a deficit. So I don't understand why we're asking staff to go away and discuss alternatives to something that they've just come back and said, this is what we need in order to discuss that. I'm not sure what we're getting them to go and rewrite here when this is what we need to do. We're underfunded. The communities south of the Queen Elizabeth are underwater. They are underwater, and we need to do this. So I don't know what we're asking staff to go and rewrite here, from my perspective at least. I know Councillor Chisholm wants gray stuff in, and from what I'm hearing, that's going to come. But we can't have it before we do the study that tells us what we need to have. So I'm confused as to what we're getting staff to go and rewrite here.
Well, we'll find out when they do, and you can approve it or disapprove it or move amendments. I would urge you that, you know, some of us live south of the QEW and we are not underwater. So, you know, everybody's underwater is a little bit of a, wouldn't you agree that's a stretch? Councillor Adams?
Thank you. I think this is a good direction that our staff are suggesting. I would fully support adding some wordage to the effect of that staff will review the needs based on a green infrastructure first kind of process or something like that. But green infrastructure is not free. Everything I've learned about low impact development and green infrastructure work is it's expensive too. It costs a whole bunch of money. So it's one way or another, we're gonna have to have a bunch of money. I just had one question for staff about the details of how what the fee would cover, because I understood from the report that there's a discussion about reserves in here, and so it wasn't quite clear to me whether the fee was intended to cover what's not already in the reserves, or is it intended to cover all of the capital costs associated with stormwater? And if there's money in our current property tax levy that is being used for stormwater, does that get freed up for something else? Is that the intent? Or is that till come back?
Through Mr. Chair, the fee evaluation study that we want to hire a consultant for is to evaluate all the rainwater infrastructure projects that are either in the reserve or not in the reserve. So this way we could provide council with the choice in terms of how we would like to apply the fee to what type of assets and to what type of funding source that could be coming from. So to answer the last question is yes, if we choose to apply the fee to assets or state of good infrastructure work that's already in the reserve, you're technically freeing up some of the reserve. But that is all going to be in the stormwater fee model that we are hoping to get approval for today to study, just to study. And through that study, there will be extensive consultation with the resident as well as the businesses, and as well as progress to come back to council for approval.
Thanks very much. So one possible outcome is there's a little bit less weight put on our property taxes.
That is correct.
A fee. Thank you. Okay, I look forward to the revised wording.
Okay, Councillor Hazard-Thiel, does anybody want to wait? Councillor Elgar volunteered to wait till we come back and see what they're going to counter propose. If you have a suggestion, go ahead.
I just want to comment that the way the recommendation and whatever you come back with will obviously be open to, but that a new stormwater fee to fund the needs identified as part of the rainwater management strategy. I think where I'm struggling is, it is saying the needs identified as part of the rainwater management strategy, and the strategy is not articulating really strongly a preference to green, a preference to hybrid, the analysis that analysis doesn't feel like it's been conveyed to us. And so that wording is what triggers me.
Thank you, Councillor. I support that point. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Through you, Member Burton. I guess I might as well give my piece too. Like, in the report, page 49, it states that the 2023 capital reserve balance is currently in a strong position with a projected balance of 124 million at the end of the year. So this isn't a crying chicken little here. Like, it's not like we're going to run out of money next week. We have time to go back, get the report, so that experts read the report, people that have technical knowledge of the report we send out to staff, and get the support that we have to do it. But it'll be done in a way, I think, it might take a little extra time, but it looks like out to 2032, we'll have 56 million cash still in the reserve, according to the staff report I have. So I support sending it back.
Sure, but mind you, we use that reserve for more than those things.
I don't disagree, but it's not like the pockets are empty.
I agree.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to have a 10-minute recess, maybe a minute or two longer for staff just to do some wordsmithing. And meanwhile, Councillor Chisholm's motion to defer is still on the floor. It's still in order. And unless he's persuaded otherwise, it has to be defeated in order to change it to anything else. So we are now in recess. We'll be back at 8:45. Hello, council has been in recess for a few minutes to consider new wording for an important motion. And for clarity, this motion by Councillor Chisholm, he having withdrawn his motion to defer, this motion by Councillor Chisholm completely replaces the indicated motion in the agenda. And we can put that motion on the screen now, as I understand it. I think it's up. And before I make so bold as to survey people with questions and comments, I see a hand from Councillor Adams. Do you have a question or comment?
I just want to clarify the intent. So the original motion said that stormwater fee to fund be endorsed and that staff proceed to develop stuff, report back in 2024. And I'm reading this as effectively incorporating those things, but it doesn't say that the strategy is being endorsed, nor does it say when it comes back. And I just wondered if staff can tell me how they interpret this and what their next steps would be.
The staff will answer, but you're right. It does not endorse a fee. It awaits proof and quantification. And the shift to preferring green infrastructure may very well change the quantum needed, and thus, so this amounts to council saying, we want more information, and authorizes staff to go get it. I don't know which commissioner, Madam CEO, I'm going to start with you to answer the councillor.
Mayor Burton, I think you have summarized that well enough. I also would note that it doesn't endorse the rainwater management strategy because it really is under development. And it'll be those individual studies that will maximize the amount of green infrastructure in each of those and have a fee or cost associated with it so that we can then understand what the full quantum of the cost is, while at the same time we'll be looking at any associated fees in order to be able to fund that program when the two things come together at the end.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Just a quick question about, will we get comparables? Just like how the delegate was talking about Vancouver, other cities in terms of where some of these programs have been implemented. So either the program or the fee structure. Can we get some comparables as well? Do we need to add anything to get that done?
Through Mr. Chair, the comparables of stormwater fees will be completed as part of the study when we investigate the stormwater fee. So you will be seeing that as a result of the overall rainwater management strategy. And that will also be part of the information we will consult with the public in terms of different ways of developing that fee.
All right, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you. So just to staff, so does this delay us moving forward with going out and getting a consultant to begin the work to find out what needs to be done to develop the strategy?
Through, Mr. Mayor, no, it does not. This does not delay staff's work. We will be hiring a consultant to develop the stormwater fee, and the green infrastructure will be prioritized through the recommendations for the funding.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yes, Councillor, I hope you appreciate that we've attempted to weave a path forward here that satisfies everyone, including the urgency that you spoke of. Councillor McNeice and then Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. So just a question, maybe to staff, but so that we will ensure green infrastructure be considered first and then sort of gray infrastructure, but are we sort of considering it based on cost alone? Or I heard the delegate say, you know, if we look at the life cycle cost and the cost of maintenance and the, you know, over the life cycle of the infrastructure, it may be more upfront for green, but less in the long run. And then if we were to factor in, you know, some sustainability elements and environmental benefits, it could sort of change that cost dynamic so that, you know, we're not just trying to save money on the short term, but we're making good investments that have lower maintenance cost and environmental benefits. Are we going to be able to evaluate the green infrastructure first based on that before we go to the gray, or is it just going to be what comes in cheaper?
Through, Mr. Mayor, it will not, each of these, under the rainwater strategy, as the CEO indicated, they have individual studies. Each of these studies will evaluate the total life cycle cost and will prioritize green over the gray or some sort of hybrid, and only go to the gray when it's absolutely necessary. So each of these studies, as they conclude, they will evaluate the overall benefit, both from an environmental perspective, the protection of the flooding, and the cost. Cost is not the only factor. That would then feed into this rainwater management strategy that will be funded by the fee and prioritized, again, through the green infrastructure first.
Okay, thank you. That explains it.
Thank you, Councillor McNeice. And Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Burton. So I'm wondering if the phrase "and any existing studies will be revisited to determine green options" is necessary. I'm just reading this and wondering, there has been work done already. There had been some determinations done already. Will they be revisited for green options versus gray or a hybrid?
Through Mr. Chair, for the purpose of the rainwater management strategy, no, we will not revisit the studies. The purpose of the strategy is the umbrella to summarize all the needs as to the what, and we're trying to find a funding solution for a long-term plan. However, each of these studies are very high level, as you're aware, and some of them are still incomplete and coming to council. The principle of prioritizing green infrastructure will be considered first, and as the study go into preliminary design and detailed design, that's when we will ensure that the revisiting happen to ensure that the green infrastructure is considered at that time.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, then let's use the Riverine study as an example. It is done, mostly done, correct? There are outcomes from the Riverine study already being suggested. Are we not going to go back and look at those just to make sure that the green options that were in that report that there are green options to be considered?
Yes, through you, Ms. Chair, for the Riverine study that has been approved and completed through an EA process will be revisited when they go through the preliminary and the detailed design next phase before it actually get implemented. For the Riverine study that's coming forward to you in fall, in the two that's still coming, they will make sure that they address green infrastructure in the evaluation. So yes to the old studies and yes to the future studies.
And you feel this wording conveys that to you?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, this wording provides us with the overall principle under the umbrella of rainwater management strategy for every single asset, not just the riverine, it could be the shoreline, it could be the erosion work, it could be the the stormwater master plan, South Oakville, all of those work under this umbrella will now review the green infrastructure to be considered first, to ensure that that is incorporated into the detailed design and that the funding will be funded under this strategy.
And so when we talk about the fee and what the consultant's, so the consultant's going to try and figure out how much all this could potentially cost us in comparison to what you've suggested. Is there going to be a reanalysis then? I think as Councillor Adams said earlier that green may cost X, gray may cost Y. Is there going, in this, is this direction saying you will be also updating your information with any additional green costs?
Yes, through Mr. Chair, when we report back to you in 2024, we will provide you a process where the overall funding strategy will be updated in every X amount of years. At that time, every few years when there's new studies and then new EAs and new designs, each of these studies will be updated. It will be very similar to the 10-year capital program that we update on an annual basis, and we ensure that there's sufficient amount of fee to fund this particular strategy.
So I guess my request is that when it comes back, will it be charted in a way that it's clear, here are green options, here are gray options, here are the hybrid options, and here's how that costing works when the public looks at it? So the public who has to possibly take on a fee, the public who, you know, the broader town may have to take on a fee, when they have a project in their area, will it be crystal clear in the public consultation what are green options, gray options, or a hybrid option?
Through Mr. We will take that comment back and we'll take a look at what are the options we could report back and how we structure the public information session.
So I do think that is, A, it's an educational point, B, it's, I think one of the delegates said it well, sometimes you need to understand what you've got and how you can take care of it. So I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there.
Council, I just want to clarify, my understanding of our direction here is that green infrastructure will be preferred. And so in the public consultation, I don't think, you know, if that is our unanimous position, and I think it is, we don't want to be saying, well, if you go all gray, it's going to be cheaper up front, and, you know, that kind of discussion. And you could be taken for having asked them to do that.
Yeah, no, I just, from a reporting perspective, the clarity of what are green options, gray options, hybrid, I'm not suggesting that green shouldn't be first, and so thank you for allowing me to clarify. You used the word preferred. I like that word. This doesn't say, it says considered first, preferred, or, you know, green infrastructure as a first principle. I just think that's a stronger message that
First principle's the best. Preferred.
I think the messaging has to be strong that's where you have to go and I thought preferred was a great choice, or principle.
Okay, I've accidentally changed it. I'm gonna read it, and I'm gonna, with your permission, I'll then put the vote. Okay, Councillor Chisholm is moving that the rainwater management strategy under development and associated fees and studies ensure that green infrastructure be preferred and gray infrastructure only where necessary, with a program of public consultation. Any objection? I just did. And I saw no objection. Wait, there may be an objection from Bronny. Councillor O'Meara.
Yeah, so no correlation to costs at all. It's just, I mean, to have this discussion without hundreds of millions of dollars that may come along with that, and that the wording that was just considered right now and just changed, I can't support that, not knowing what any of those costs, that it's just going to be preferred no matter how much it costs. I can't support that, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. It carries with one objection. Thank you, everybody. Now, let's see where we are. That didn't take long. I believe we're now ready to look at 9.1, and we have a report and presentation from Doug Carr, the town solicitor, on strong mayor powers and duties. Mr. Carr?
Thank you, Mayor Burton, members of council. I know it's been a night of some challenging work for you, and I'll try and keep this moving along. But it is an important topic. My goal is to provide information to council and hopefully some clarity where required to some fairly noteworthy changes in municipal law that now are in effect in Oakville and a number of other municipalities as of July the 1st. I'll just start right there with the next slide, please. So obviously with new law, you start with the legislation. We have two pieces of legislation that we're referring to this evening. The Strong Mayors Building Homes Act 2022. It was introduced as Bill 3 back in August of 2022, received royal assent in September, and came into force on November the 23rd. It had two schedules. The first schedule was a new Part 6.1 to the City of Toronto Act 2006, and for our purposes, a Schedule 2 that added a new Part 6.1 in the Municipal Act, which added new sections 284.2 to 284.17, and the heading for that part is Special Powers and Duties of the Head of Council. The other piece of legislation that came into force is the Better Municipal Governance Act 2022, otherwise known as Bill 39. It received first reading back in November, royal assent in December, and came into force in December, on December the 20th, 2022. So it was passed fairly quickly by the province, and it created new powers re-bylaws in the Municipal Act 2001, and specifically one new section, Section 284.11.1, which I'll come to later in the presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you. In addition to the legislation, you've got regulations. Two regulations that I'll be referring to. The first regulation, and they're both under the Municipal Act, 530/2022 as amended. As a regulation, it provides specific provisions and requirements with respect to the new part of the Municipal Act that came into force. That regulation was amended effective July the 1st, 2023, pursuant to provincial announcement on June the 16th to expand strong mayor powers beyond Toronto and Ottawa to the mayors of 26 large and fast-growing municipalities, including Oakville, that committed to a housing pledge. The province made that announcement on June the 16th, and the regulation was amended, as I say, effective July the 1st, to give force to that announcement. So just so you're clear how it works, the strong mayor powers and duties provisions of the Act have been in place since the end of December 2022. They're fully in force and effect. And those provisions of the Act apply to any municipality that's designated by regulation as a municipality to which that part then applies. So there's no change to the legislation, it's only that the regulation is designating those municipalities that those provisions apply to. So as I say, the new amended regulation effectively only expanded the list of designated municipalities where those provisions apply, including Oakville as of July the 1st. So this is, the reason I'm emphasizing this is that the assignment of strong mayor powers and duties to the mayors of designated municipalities occurs automatically by operation of law. The powers are there. The province has designated that those powers now apply to the 26 identified municipalities. There's no jurisdiction, and I know this has been in the media a fair bit, but there's no jurisdiction for municipalities to decline or refuse to be designated by regulation under the Act. The province has acted. The province has passed a regulation that says these municipalities are now subject to this part of the Municipal Act. And similarly, there's no discretion for the mayor or any head of council or to any municipal council to refuse to accept or to impose local restrictions on the assigned strong mayor powers and duties under the Act that arise by virtue of the designation from the regulation. Next slide, please. The other regulation that I wanted to bring to council's attention is 580/2022. Again, this is under the Municipal Act, and it identifies provincial priorities that are prescribed for the purposes of the exercise of certain powers by the mayor. And those two provincial priorities identified by this regulation are building 1.5 million new residential units by December the 31st, 2031. And secondly, constructing and maintaining infrastructure to support housing, including transit, roads, utilities, and servicing. Those two priorities apply to the mayor's powers in three provisions of the Act, which I'll come to. Powers re meetings, powers re bylaws, which are the Bill 39 powers, and the veto powers, and I've identified the section numbers there. Next slide, please. So I don't want to overwhelm you with information, and this is a slide you can refer to later. It's kind of like a cheat sheet, and it's also the framework and a roadmap by which I'm going to be proceeding with my presentation. And it's headed the special powers and duties of the mayor. I borrowed this freely from the City of Toronto. This is something that they had provided in order to provide a cheat sheet and a roadmap for their councillors. So I cribbed from it. Any errors, of course, are mine alone, but it's a very helpful tool. And you'll see that there are three essentially buckets or topics that I'm going to be proceeding with my presentation on. The powers to advance those prescribed provincial priorities, which I've already identified for you, and they're highlighted in the bottom left-hand corner, what those prescribed provincial priorities are. The second bucket is powers re-administrative and political structure of the town. And the third is the duty to prepare the annual budgets. And I'll be addressing each of those. I'm not going to go through each of these bullets here because I will be doing that in the course of my presentation. But this is a slide you'll be able to come back to as a roadmap for what or a reminder to the key points that I'm trying to highlight tonight. And below that are some supporting provisions in the legislation that support how these powers are to be exercised. And in the very fine print in the bottom right, it's just highlighting that there are other provisions in the Municipal Act that are not affected by the new legislation. So there's already provisions in the Act that refer to the role of the mayor as the head of council, Section 225, and the role of the mayor as chief executive officer, Section 226.1. Those provisions remain and are unaffected by the new legislation. Next slide, please. So the first bucket of the first topic I wanted to review with you are the powers to advance provincial priorities. These are the three sections that I referred to earlier. So the first is the powers re-meetings, Section 284.10, and it provides that if the head of council or the mayor is of the opinion that considering a particular matter could potentially advance a prescribed provincial priority, the mayor may require the council to consider the matter at a meeting. A meeting is a regular meeting of council, and the procedure bylaw provisions do not apply should the mayor decide that he wishes to introduce a particular matter that he considers will advance a provincial priority. The next provision is similar, but it refers to bylaws rather than the generic word matter. And this is the section Bill 39 powers you may have heard about. This is the new section that was introduced by the later legislation. And it provides that if the mayor is of the opinion that a bylaw could potentially advance a prescribed provincial priority, the mayor may propose the bylaw to the council and require the council to consider and vote on the proposed bylaw at a meeting. It applies to bylaws under the Municipal Act, Planning Act, and Development Charges Act. The mayor is required to provide to the clerk and to each member of council a copy of the proposed bylaw and the reasons for the proposal. And such bylaw is passed if more than 1/3 of the members of council vote in favor of such a bylaw. So it's got some attention because it's away from the majority rule that councils are accustomed to. But in this case, where the mayor is introducing a bylaw that he or she considers could potentially advance a priority, then it would pass if more than 1/3 of the members of council vote in favor of it. The mayor may vote in a vote to pass the proposed bylaw, and again, the procedure bylaw does not apply. Next slide, please. The last section dealing with powers to advance provincial priorities is kind of the flip side of the previous two sections, in the sense that if the mayor is of the opinion that all or part of a bylaw could potentially interfere with a prescribed provincial priority, the mayor may provide written notice to the council of the intent to consider vetoing the bylaw. Again, it applies to bylaws under the Municipal Act, Planning Act, and Development Charges Act. And the section requires that if the mayor intends to do so, he shall provide written notice within 2 days after council has voted in favor of the bylaw. So as a consequence of that, bylaws passed by council are deemed not to have been passed until 2 days after council voted in favor of the bylaw. And this is what happened with the bylaws passed by Planning and Development Council last night. By virtue of this section, those bylaws would not come into force for 2 days unless the mayor issues a written approval of those bylaws, which is what happened. So the mayor has 2 days to indicate whether or not he intends to veto any bylaw. And then he has, if he does so, then he has 14 days to actually exercise the veto after council voted in favor of the bylaw. Again, by providing a written veto to the clerk, including the reasons for the veto on the day of the veto. So in that case, the clerk provides the mayor's written veto document to each member of council, makes it available to the public by the next business day, and subject to council override, a vetoed bylaw is deemed not to have been passed. Council, however, may override the mayor's veto if 2/3 vote to override it within 21 days. And again, the mayor may vote in a vote to override a veto. If council overrides the veto, the bylaw is deemed to have been passed on the day council votes to override. It's complicated and there are things going back and forth here, but essentially it's an opportunity for the mayor to veto a bylaw that he considers may interfere with a provincial priority, a veto which, if exercised, council has the ability to override with a 2/3 vote within 21 days. And again, the procedure bylaw does not apply. So that's my discussion on the first bucket of advancing provincial priorities. The next is, next slide please. This is the section on the administrative and political structure of the town. So under these sections, the mayor has authority. Any head of council of a designated municipality has certain powers with respect to certain structures within the town. The mayor may appoint and dismiss the CAO. That power has been assigned to the mayor, and that power exists regardless of when the CAO started. The CAO continues in their position unless dismissed by the mayor, and the mayor may delegate this power to council. The mayor is also assigned the power to determine the organizational structure of the municipality. Again, the existing organizational structure continues unless it's changed by the mayor. And again, the mayor may delegate this power to council, or in this case, to the CAO. Thirdly, the mayor or any head of council of a designated municipality may, in writing, exercise the powers of the municipality to direct employees to undertake research and to carry out duties related to the exercise of the power or performance of a duty in this part of the Act. And you will see in some cases, I believe in the City of Toronto, the mayor took advantage of this part of the Act to execute certain written directions to staff to undertake certain work. So when directing employees, the mayor shall provide a written record of the direction to the clerk and the CAO by the next business day. Next slide, please. The mayor is also assigned the power to hire, dismiss, or exercise any other prescribed employment powers with respect to the head of any division or the head of any other part of the organizational structure. And that's taken directly from the provision, regardless of when their employment started. Now, you'll see in the phrase, or exercise any other prescribed employment powers, there haven't been any identified or designated or prescribed in the regulation. So at this point, it's limited to the power to hire and dismiss. There are certain statutory officials that are exempt from this power, including, as I've listed here, the clerk or deputy clerk, treasurer or deputy treasurer, integrity commissioner, if there is one, and there is one in our case, ombudsman, auditor general, registrar for lobbying matters, chief building official, and fire chief. The existing heads of any part of the organizational structure continue in their positions unless dismissed by the mayor. And again, this is a power that can be delegated to council or to the CAO. Next slide, please. Staying on the topic of powers re administrative and political structure of the town, powers re committees, section 284.8. The mayor is assigned certain powers with respect to committees that are comprised solely of members of council. So those powers include, or are limited to, the power to establish or dissolve committees, the power to appoint chairs and vice chairs of committees, the power to assign functions to committees. The chairs and vice chairs of a committee, council committee, continue in their position unless their appointment is revoked by the mayor. Chairs and vice chairs may be dismissed regardless of when that person started. And again, the mayor may delegate these powers to council. There's also a section with respect to local boards. I won't spend much time on this because there are no regulations related to it, but there is that provision that states that the mayor is assigned the power to appoint chairs and vice chairs of prescribed local boards. None have been prescribed yet. And by local boards, of course, I mean boards that are exercising some duty or power that they have under statute, such as a committee of adjustment or a public library board, that kind of thing. But again, there are no local boards yet prescribed. And similarly, chairs and vice chairs of local boards continue in their position unless their appointment is revoked by the mayor, regardless of when that person started in their position. And the mayor may delegate these powers, although it doesn't state who to at this point. So this section is not fully formed yet. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's my second bucket. Now I'm moving to the third, the duty to prepare annual budgets. And you'll be, I think, hearing much of this again when the Budget Committee, I believe, convenes next week. But this is an important change. So under Section 284.16 of the Municipal Act now, the mayor is assigned the powers and duties of the municipality with respect to proposing and adopting a budget. And that means, under the regulation, that on or before February the 1st of each year, the mayor shall prepare a proposed budget, including estimates of all sums required, and provide it to council and make it available to the public. And this is an important point. The duty to prepare and adopt a budget cannot be delegated by the mayor. He does not have that authority. The duty to prepare and adopt a budget passes to council only if the mayor does not propose a budget to council by February the 1st. And this is a section that on its face looks pretty innocuous, but I think is quite important. The section says, 284.16 sub 6, budgets proposed by the mayor for the municipality shall be adopted in accordance with the regulations. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that budgets proposed by the mayor are now deemed adopted by running through the amendment, veto, and veto override process that I'm going to take you through in a minute, within a prescribed time frame in the regulation. And that time frame commences once the mayor proposes his budget to council. And so budgets are adopted by running through that process, not by a separate vote of council. It's important that you understand that. Next slide, please. So what is this amendment, veto, and veto override process that the regulation created? So within 30 days of the mayor proposing his budget to council, council then may pass a resolution to amend the budget that's been proposed by the mayor. If there's no such resolution to amend the budget, the proposed budget is deemed to be adopted by the municipality. So if council does nothing for 30 days or does not make any amendments, then it's deemed adopted. If, however, council does propose certain recommendations to the budget, then within 10 days of that, the mayor may veto a council resolution making an amendment to the budget. If the mayor chooses not to exercise that veto, then the proposed budget, again, is deemed to be adopted by the municipality as amended by council. If there is a veto by the mayor of any amendment coming from council, then within 15 days, council may override that veto by a 2/3 vote. And the mayor may vote in a vote to override the veto. So if there's no, I know this is getting complicated, but it's important. If there's no veto override by council, the mayor has exercised a veto and that veto is not overridden by council, then again, the proposed budget is deemed to be adopted by the municipality subject to the veto. If, however, the veto is overridden by council by a 2/3 vote, then the budget is deemed to be adopted as amended by council. So you see there's a number of steps in the process, and depending on what happens at each step, it either moves to the next step or it's deemed to be adopted. So in total, If all the steps run their full course, the latest the budget shall be deemed to be adopted is 55 days in total after the mayor provides the proposed budget to council. And that's just adding the 30, the 10, and the 15. However, you don't have to wait 55 days. The adoption process can be expedited by the mayor and by council, who each have the discretion to shorten the timeframes as they apply to them. As an aside, the mayor may also prepare a proposed in-year budget amendment if a supplementary levy is required. I don't know that that's ever happened at the town, but that power is there. There's a similar process for amendments, vetoes, and veto overrides for in-year budgets should they arise, and shorter timeframes. Next slide, please. So I won't spend much time on this. There are supporting provisions throughout the Act that I've highlighted here. In writing, the mayor is required to exercise a power or perform a duty under this part of the Act in writing and provide a written record by the next business day to each member of council and to the clerk. And the written record shall also be made available to the public unless there's an applicable exemption under the Municipal Freedom and Information and Privacy Act that may apply. But generally, the rule is the mayor's decisions are in writing to be provided to the clerk, to each member of council, and to be made available to the public whenever exercising a power under this part of the Act. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act provisions apply. So if the mayor has a pecuniary interest in any matter, he is to disclose it within a certain time by filing a written statement of interest and its general nature to the clerk, and not use his strong mayor powers with respect to any matter that he may have a pecuniary interest in. Vacancy, in the case of vacancy, strong mayor powers transfer to a newly elected mayor, but not in the case of an appointed mayor. And that arises where a vacancy in the mayor's position occurs after March the 31st in the year of a regular election. And finally, there's an immunity provision that provides that the strong mayor powers exercised legally and in good faith may not be quashed or open to review by the courts because of the supposed unreasonableness of the decision. Next slide, please. So that's a very quick summary. Implementation. I've tried to explain that this part of the Act sets out special powers and duties for the head of council in designated municipalities. The regulation has been amended to expand the list of designated municipalities, including Oakville, that are subject to those provisions. There's one minor housekeeping amendment in the regulation that I won't spend any time on, but it clarifies that it's the lower tier municipality, not the upper tier municipality, that fills a vacancy that may arise in both councils from the vacancy of the head of council. That's the only substantive change in the regulation. The rest of it is the list of new designated municipalities. There's a paragraph in the posting on the Ontario Regulatory Registry that related to this regulation that I quoted here because I think it's important. It highlights what the intent of the province was. And I'll just read it. It says, local impacts will depend on how the heads of council in designated municipalities choose to use these strong mayor powers and how the municipality will support the implementation of these powers and duties for the head of council. There are no requirements in the regulations that would result in new administrative costs for municipalities. Municipalities may choose to update local processes and policies at any time based on their local needs and circumstances. So that was the view of the province in introducing this regulation. So while I said earlier there's no discretion to refuse to accept the strong mayor powers. Heads of council in designated municipalities do have discretion whether and how to use the powers and duties within the limits of the law. So under the topic of implementation, staff have been studying initiatives undertaken by Toronto and Ottawa to date to implement the strong mayor powers processes, including hosting web pages, posting written mayoral decisions, and the mayor issuing written approval of bylaws passed by council to give them immediate effect so that you don't have to wait 2 days before bylaws coming into effect. And there's now a link to the web page that's now up on the Town of Oakville webpage that provides a very brief summary of strong mayor powers and where you will see the postings of all mayor decisions. Next slide, please. Last slide is conclusion. So I tried to pull it together here. Staff continued to review the legislation and the regulations and confer with other municipalities to determine best practices in ensuring that town processes, bylaws, policies, and other governing documents are consistent with the law. Having said that, in going through this process, we're learning that the province has left much of the content and the details to be defined by evolving regulation, and there are gaps, there are ambiguities, and they present implementation challenges for affected municipalities. And in the face of those gaps and ambiguities, and with the timing and the content of any new or further regulations unknown, each impacted municipality, so these are the 26 that have been designated, is tasked with how best to interpret and implement the assignment of these new powers and duties in the Act. And so I think what you will find is that these factors, together with the discretion that's left to each head of council as to whether and how best to exercise these powers in their municipality, is likely to lead to a range of different approaches, not one cookie cutter solution fits all, a range of different approaches, applications, policies, practices, and procedures among the designated municipalities. And it may well be at some point that there will be more municipalities coming on stream at some point in the future. But right now, the designated municipalities are coming to grips with what these new powers mean and how they will be exercised. So the flip side of that, though, is that when you have that kind of flexibility on how the powers and duties are exercised, it also provides an opportunity for heads of council to determine what is most appropriate and what is responsive to the local context and the needs of their municipality. So the heads of council have that flexibility. And with that, that concludes my presentation, Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. To your chair, Mayor Burton. So right now, with the new powers that come into effect July the 1st, 4 members of council plus the mayor can control a council of 15 people.
No,
That is,
no, Councillor.
that's not right?
Your math is a little bit off.
Okay. I thought-
One more than one, a third of our council is 5, and it has to be one more than a third.
So we need
six-
5 councilors and yourself.
6 members of council can make decisions under the Act in those prescribed circumstances.
Okay.
And only if the head of council declares that it's that kind of a vote.
Yeah, no, I just found it interesting that, so it's like municipal councils, so the 26 municipal councils now in Ontario that just got the powers, like it kind of is a little bit of a step, it's kind of like it's not democracy anymore, a true democracy. There's not one vote for every head. It's weighted. And the reason I say that, it took me back as I was reading through it, And it took me back years in high school when there was a book put out by George Orwell that was written in 1943 to 44, and it was called Animal Farm. So, you know, just as a joke, I bought 15 copies so we can give it out to all members of council. It's only 91 pages, and I think it's worth a read to take you back in time. I remember studying it in school, and I talked to Councillor Adams last night we walked out, and he said, it's still on the curriculum. So anyway, I'll give everybody a copy.
Yep, through you, Mayor Burton. Yes, we studied that in high school too. It's a fabulous book. But I just want to add a point of clarity to your point, and that is what you're referring to is one section, and that's section 284.11.1. And that's where, first of all, the mayor has to have the opinion that a bylaw that has been passed by council interferes. No, I'm sorry, I have it backwards. So 284.11.1, if the mayor is of the opinion that a bylaw could potentially advance a prescribed provincial priority, so it's in the context of those priorities, then he may propose the bylaw, and then he has to give reasons for why he considers that it will advance a provincial priority, and then require council to vote on that bylaw. And that's where the 1/3 rule applies. But yes, it's an unusual provision, but that's the one and only provision in this part where the 1/3 rule applies.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. So first of all, will you circulate this slide deck to us? Thank you.
Yes.
It's a well-prepared document, and that cheat sheet will come in very handy trying to understand it. My question is with respect to the appointment of personnel. So at one point it says department heads are subject to the appointment by the mayor, and then there are exceptions to that later on. Is that how I understand it? So the mayor can appoint a commissioner, but the mayor cannot appoint a clerk. Is that how I read it?
Yes, it isn't very well drafted. I will concede that. And I've quoted the section directly, and it doesn't actually refer to department heads. It refers to the head of any part of the organizational structure. So, that when I reference gaps and ambiguities, you say, well, how far in the organization does that go, right? But so there is that power of the mayor to exercise that power to hire and fire heads of any part of the organizational structure, with the exception of that list. So the no-touch employees, the clerk, and all the rest of those are exempt from that power. And again, this power to hire and fire can be delegated to either council or to the CAO.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? And then I'm looking for a motion. Oh, Councillor Hazzateel.
Mayor Burton, will you be making a statement in regards to delegating any of those authorities that you're allowed to delegate?
Over the next few weeks, I'll be making decisions about each of these things. I will say now that I always work for Oakville to be Canada's most livable and fiscally healthy town where everyone can thrive. I'm proud of my record of public consultation and consensus seeking. And because council approaches our work similarly, I cannot imagine strong mayor voting and veto powers being needed. I welcome the act making mayors more responsible, more transparent, and more accountable to the public and council, while providing administrative powers to match the public's expectations of mayors and their view of the role of a CEO. The role of CEO is a long-standing role of mayors in the Municipal Act, as the solicitor detailed to you. For our budgets, I'm committed to achieving the most collaborative and engaging experience and responsible result possible for everyone to reach our shared vision of a vibrant and livable community for all. I look forward to the Budget Committee meeting, and I think we're all going to have a good time and achieve a great result for our town. Thank you for the opportunity. Would someone like to move receipt of the information? Councillor Chisholm, thank you. Any objections? There being none, that carries. Council, I'd like to ask your attention for the advisory committee minutes from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We just need to approve them. Anyone? Councillor Adams, thank you. Any objection? That's carried. We now need a motion to rise and report to council. Councillor McNeice, thank you. Any objection? That carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 7.1, discussion items 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, and advisory committee minutes 11.1 as noted by the clerk. Is there a mover and seconder for the report? Councillor Shi and Councillor Longo, thank you very much. Council, any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and the report is adopted. Council, I want to call your attention to the memos in the council package, the transportation engineering memo, the urban mobility and transportation study and transportation master plan public engagement, the one about the Bell Fiber project, and the one about municipal clearance for liquor sales. I know of no new business or requests for reports, but I would ask if there are any statements of condolence or other. I've got 3 going here. I'm going to start with Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Haslethiel, and Councillor McNeice. You get the last word of the known speakers anyway. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have a question with regards to the memo item 13.3 with the Bell Fiber. It is, and this might be to staff, is Bell a part of our municipal access agreement? And do we have control over the state with which they repair our municipal right-of-ways as they go through and undertake all this work? Or are we going to see things hanging from trees again?
Well, Councillor, while staff decide who's going to answer you, we do have to remember that they're like the railroad. They think they're exempt from us. So everything we do with them tends to be by agreement. Director Stevens.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Yes, we do have a municipal access agreement with Bell. This work is being done under the terms of that municipal access agreement. But in developing the plan for this work, Bell and their contractor have both committed to ensuring that they are responsive to any concerns that do come up from the public with respect to the condition of the work that's being done and things like that. Bell does often need to put in temporary services to ensure that they're able to connect to people quickly and ensure that they're able to access their internet service. But this is new services related to installing fiber, so I don't think through this project we would see the same types of things as we will see with repair work and other projects that Bell is required to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we need to continue to ask them nicely. Councillor Haslethiel.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I just wanted to follow up on an outstanding report issue. The Parks Plan 2031 draft plan dedication bylaw. There was a request for the Parks Plan, and there's quite a list of things there that were to be reported back on. Previously, it used to say Q4. I'm asking that it be reinstated as Q4 so that we have this important information relative to all of the things that are happening around housing and neighborhoods and acquisition of parkland, et cetera.
Madam CAO.
Mayor Burton, if Colleen Bell is on, I think she can assist in addressing why the timing has changed and what was the rationale behind that. If
Well, we
Colleen
do
can
see
sign
her on the screen, and as she lights up, we'll hear from her. Commissioner Bell.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. The reason why that was delayed is because of the analysis on the impact of Bill 23 and how we would address those issues going forward with respect to parkland. So we can certainly look at the timing, Councillor Haslett-Theo, in terms of when we can report back on those outstanding issues.
But Bill 20, we knew about Bill 23 when we put this in place, and we had Q4 down then. So if you could report back, I'd appreciate it. This is integral. I mean, every councillor is impacted by this, understanding how we can acquire land, where we could acquire land. It's a comprehensive and important part of building communities. So if it could be reported out before the end of the year or early into 2024, I think it's important.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McNeice?
Through your worship, I'm on item 14 as well. So it'd be 4.4, sort of under the Planning Services Department section. I've noticed that the staff reports I've requested going back to December of last year, as well as another one in March, are still all TBD. So I think they're very timely tools and processes to help us better accommodate in Bronte Village the growth and development. So if that could kind of get in the queue and be prioritized, I think it would be quite beneficial. Additionally, there's one that could be related going back, I'm guessing it was from Councillor O'Meara back in 2015, related to Bronte Village community improvement plans. And I think there was some talk that that could be married into the community planning permit system staff report. Yeah, so I think it would be great if that could be a priority, just to the nature of the development we're seeing and potential future applications in Bronte.
Thank you, Councillor McNeice. Could I have a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws? Councillor Knoll and Councillor Nanda. This is for the following bylaws to be passed: bylaw 2023-92, which was from item 7.1, and the confirmatory bylaw. Any objection to the bylaws? Madam Clerk, there being none, the bylaws are read, considered, and passed. And that brings us to the end of our work tonight. It has been an outstanding display of diligence and community concern and preparation by everyone. It is, as always, a great pleasure to have worked with you tonight, and I look forward to seeing everybody next time. Good night.